For coming. My name is Kurt with the Climate Center. I am your host and MC for the day. Just a couple logistics issues. First of all, we're very grateful to be here at the California Endowment. This is free space if you're a nonprofit. Screaming deal, absolutely fabulous staff. So thank you to our hosts. Samantha, do a bow because you're unbelievable. Thank you, Samantha. In terms of just logistics background issues, there are bathrooms on this floor and also upstairs. Lots of other kind of housekeeping issues. There's Wi-Fi available, TCE guest. Actually, the next slide has that on it. We have some press here, and they're hopefully going to talk to any of you that they're interested in talking to. Let's see, we are recording all of this on Zoom. And so all the recordings and all the materials will be available after the event. So you don't have to take pictures of the screen. You get the slide deck. And there's an unbelievable slide deck, I got to say, with incredible amounts of information. You're all going to get it after the event. And yeah, the agendas for today are all on your table. Why is it not advancing? Okay, we need Samantha back. There we go. Okay, so if your phone, you can take a picture. It'll grab the QR code, and you get the agenda. Anyway, enough logistics. I'd like to introduce my boss, CEO of the Climate Center, Ellie Cohen. Take it away, Ellie.
Thank you, Kurt. Thanks for being here, everybody. Really glad to have you with us. I'm so pleased to welcome you all to today's symposium. It's organized through the committee, which includes Zero Net Energy Alliance, Community Energy and Equity Resources, MCE. You can raise your hands when I call these names out. The Energy Coalition and the California Institute for Energy and Environment at UC Berkeley, with support from the California Energy Commission. So let's give them all a hand. Thank you. So at the Climate Center, we're a climate and energy policy think tank, do tank. We're working to enact policy to build a statewide network of advanced energy communities. We call it, what do we call it? The grid for the future. Come on, the grid for the future. An electricity system built from the bottom up with hundreds of advanced energy communities, thousands of microgrids, and millions of clean, distributed energy resources, intelligently orchestrated and working seamlessly together. As an example, I own 2 bidirectional EVs. And in California, as you all probably know, how many EVs do we have in California today? 2.5 million. That's absolutely right. And of those, how many are bidirectional? And Kurt can't answer. 5. My 2. Yeah, right now. 200,000. So we have 200,000 EVs like my GM and Nissan. And combined together, these 200,000 vehicles have roughly the same capacity as California's largest power plant, which is Diablo Canyon. It's pretty cool. So let's use them. Let's do it. Working together, we can make California a role model for the world in how to build a cleaner, more resilient, reliable, equitable, and more affordable electricity system. In the end, we know we need this to withstand greater climate extremes as we face a rapidly worsening climate crisis. So have a great day today. I'm looking forward to it very much. And I'm pleased to hand the mic to Richard Jorsky from ZNE, who is the lead organizer for this event. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Ellie, and thank you, Kurt, who has been our producer today, and welcome everybody. This is just an amazing event insofar as all the organizations that Ellie mentioned have been at this literally for a decade. And as Eric Stokes from the Energy Commission will describe, he was present at the creation of the original solicitation that was a planning grant back in 2016 or 2015. And we have been at this for a while and following the bouncing ball of energy policy, economics, politics, and so forth as we all together, and I know everybody in this room in some way, shape, or form has been involved in an advanced energy community framework in the sense of deploying energy, clean energy resources, And some of you are deploying virtual power plants now in various ways. All of you have been involved in some respect in energy policy development. And I just want to acknowledge that it's quite arbitrary that we've got a dozen or so presenters and all of you in the so-called audience. And I happen to know, because this was a by invitation event, that just about everybody here could be up here like I am, and others will be here discoursing on various facets and going quite deep and broad in energy policy. So we want to respect your time and your participation by giving you a lot of time today. Everybody is under strict orders on the panels to cut it and have open discussion. And so for each panel, we have roughly half an hour of open discussion, and we want to get into the weeds. We got wonks here. We want to get into the weeds. Our promise is to go deep. Please ask your most sophisticated questions and your most sophisticated ideas, because this is that kind of event. So I'm planning to learn a lot. I hope you all will also learn a lot. And I just want to acknowledge that we do have both plenary and breakout panels. So this morning is going to be a plenary panel to open us up on the affordability challenge and on lessons learned from our 4 projects, which you'll hear a lot more about, so I won't preview any of that. And then in the afternoon, we've got 3 breakouts, concurrent breakouts, and then another plenary at the end to talk about how we move this whole initiative and move this whole movement really forward into what we can all consider fully scaled deployment. And I was just chatting with my colleague, Sam Irvine at MCE, and he was describing that 8 of the largest CCAs in the state are now working to coordinate their policies and programs and share learnings around virtual power plants. And you can't really do a VPP without having an advanced energy community, without having a lot of connected devices that are really in an orchestrated mode. So we know that this wave is coming across the whole CCA movement. We know that there's some great opportunities to work with our IOU partners and certainly with the CAISO on market integration and on the actual coupling, if you will, of the wholesale grid, the distribution system, and the retail providers that are in this room in the CCA community. So we think this is the opportunity for scale, for integration, and for impact. And we're really excited to have those themes be key today, along with affordability, equity, and decarbonization. But it's kind of like we're all on that road already. Now it's how do we bring that to scale through the advanced energy community model. And we want to keep this branding. We think advanced energy community, as it was articulated back a dozen years ago, is a great frame because it inherently kind of invokes all of the dimensions of renewables, of the edge-centric grid, frankly, of local control. For those of us who are speaking from the community choice perspective, we think that's extremely important. And microgrids, community solar, all of those community kind of ground up resources can and should be integrated and should be foundational to what Ellie referred to as the grid of the future. So we're really excited about today's themes, today's people, and y'all in the audience. And I just want to thank you for making the time today. I'm going to introduce now Eric Stokes, who's really was present at the creation of this. Eric is the Commissioner, Chief of Staff to Commissioner Gallardo. Unfortunately, she had to send her regrets last night. She was called away to another engagement today, but we do have Commissioner McAllister, who's going to be our wrap-up person from the commission at the end of the day. And Eric is extremely well qualified to talk about this, not only as the Chief of Staff, but he was the Deputy Director of the R&D Division and the Manager of the Energy Deployment and Market Facilitation Office prior to that. I told him when I grow up, I would love to have that title, because what is more important than energy deployment and market facilitation? So I want to drill down on that, because that's what we're talking about today. But with that, Eric, thank you so much for making the time, and look forward to hearing the origin story.
So unfortunately, we got rid of the name Energy Deployment and Market Facilitation Office. We'll see if we can create it again. It didn't really roll off the tongue, and it didn't really have a great acronym either. EDFMO was not the staff weren't crazy about it. So good morning, and thank you for the invitation to be here. As Richard said, it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since we launched.
No slides.
No slides. Okay. All right. I didn't prepare any. Since we launched the Advanced Energy Communities Initiative, and it's incredibly exciting to be here today where we're talking about real projects, real partnerships, and now conversation about scaling. I got to admit, there were some years where it's pretty touch and go, especially some of those COVID years where I think there was definitely some concerns whether some of these projects would ever get to completion. So this is really exciting. I went back last night, I looked at the original solicitation, and I think one thing that struck me is how relevant this concept we put together a decade ago is still even till today, and maybe even more relevant. And I think that's a testament to the team that put this together and some of their forward thinking on this topic. What I'd like to do this morning is just briefly step back and talk about the thinking behind Advanced Energy Communities. What were we trying to accomplish with this initiative, and really why this approach is relevant today. When we started thinking about this concept, DERs were moving beyond early adoption. Rooftop solar was expanding quickly. Battery storage was entering the market, and electric vehicles were beginning to grow. There was also increasing interest in electrification and in using demand more flexibly. As Commissioner McCallagher likes to say, being good citizens of the grid. So I know he's in the audience. I want to make sure I put that plug out there. One thing we found is most of the policies and programs at the time were still focused on individual technologies. Solar, storage, zero emission transportation were largely being advanced through separate efforts. At the same time, I think there was a growing recognition, really a lot of people in this room, that the value of these resources, both to the customer and to the grid, would be much greater if they were planned and operated in a coordinated way. The challenge was that there were several barriers that made that level of coordination difficult. One challenge was the lack of planning tools and planning capacity at the local level. At the same time, these new DER technologies were changing the role of customers and communities. For the first time, communities really had meaningful options about their energy use, and not just what it meant for their consumption and carbon emissions, but also for reliability and resiliency. And the shift towards greater customer and community choice suggested that more decisions about the energy system would increasingly be made locally. If DERs were going to play a larger role, communities would need the tools, information, as well as the institutional capacity to plan for them and to align deployment with local priorities. Cost was another major barrier. I think in a lot of ways it still is, though we've seen huge cost reductions in a lot of these technologies. But many of these technologies were still expensive, particularly the upfront investment. Battery storage costs were high, electric vehicle infrastructure required substantial investment, and integrating multiple technologies increased both complexity and financing challenges. If integrated solutions were going to move beyond the early adopters, we needed to better understand what kinds of planning, financing, and deployment approaches could improve the economics and reduce those barriers. And at the time, it didn't feel like we had a lot of those pieces in place to really try to move these things forward. Equity was also a central consideration when we designed this initiative. Energy equity had become a policy priority for the CEC and the state, and still is. But there was a clear concern that the benefits of DERs could be uneven if access depended on the ability to make large upfront investments. At the same time, many of the benefits of DERs, from the lower energy costs, the improved air quality, and the resilience are extremely important to disadvantaged communities. Taken together, these challenges shaped how we approached the design of the Advanced Energy Communities program. The focus of the program was not necessarily to prove that the technologies work. For most cases, we knew the technologies would perform well, but to understand what it would take to deploy them together in a way that communities could actually implement. So rather than focusing primarily on technology performance, which is kind of the bread and butter when you're in a research and development division, the goal was to create space for communities to develop and test new approaches to planning, financing, and coordinating distributed energy resources in ways that could reduce costs, expand access, and make integrated deployment practical at scale. The funding program we structured as a competition because we wanted to encourage that kind of innovation. We asked project teams bringing together local governments, developers, utilities, technology providers, researchers, and community partners to develop a comprehensive vision for how DERs could be deployed at the community scale. The intent was to bring the right partners together to address the barriers we were seeing, especially these non-technical barriers, the cost challenges, the need for coordination across multiple technologies and organizations, and really the lack of local planning capacity. Teams were asked to focus on approaches that could reduce the need for costly transmission and distribution upgrades through better local energy management, while also delivering energy savings, emissions reductions, and improved reliability and resiliency. At the same time, these approaches needed to work in the real world. There had been a lot of literature on this type of integrated framework, but we hadn't seen a whole lot of real world examples to really test out this hypothesis. These projects needed to be financially viable, attractive from a market perspective, and capable of expanding affordable access to clean energy and efficiency improvements across the community. Just as important, the expectation from the beginning was that these efforts would produce models that could be replicated and scaled. The goal wasn't necessarily to fund isolated demonstration projects, but to identify approaches that could drive down costs over time and be applied to other communities. The stage structure of the competition reflected that intent. Teams first competed based on the strength of their plans as well as their partnerships. Those with the most promising and replicable approaches, at least according to our scoring team, were then eligible for additional funding to move forward with the implementation, of which we had 4, 2 strategically targeted in Northern California and 2 in Southern California. Another important design decision we made was to avoid being overly prescriptive about what an advanced energy community should look like. We provided objectives and guideposts around integration, cost reduction, community benefits, and sustainability, but we didn't define a specific technology package or implementation model. Instead, projects were asked to define their own vision based on local conditions and priorities. This allowed proposals to reflect local differences and priorities. It also allowed the state, specifically us, to learn where the barriers were, what partnerships formed, and what approaches proved workable in practice. Because this was new territory, we wanted a diversity of approaches so that everybody can really engage in the learning process of what was happening. From the beginning, the goal wasn't necessarily to replicate identical communities. The goal was to identify elements, including partnership structures, planning processes, financing approaches, and coordination methods that could be adapted by other communities over time. Another aspect of the program that was important to us was capacity. The intent was not only to fund projects, but to support the development of new partnerships and new ways of working together. Integrating DERs at the community scale requires coordination across many jurisdictions, community organizations, utilities, CCAs, developers, and technology providers. In many cases, those relationships and planning structures did not exist at that time. We saw these projects as an opportunity to build that institutional capacity so the work could continue beyond the initial funding. Looking back, the thinking behind the program was fairly straightforward. The transition to DERs is not just a technology challenge, it's also a planning challenge, it's a financing challenge, and it's really a coordination challenge that plays out at the local level. And we saw that play out through these projects. Now that these projects are reaching completion, the value of this effort is the experience that has been generated. I think we saw a lot of examples where the project teams learned a lot. They learned around how to do site selection through sometimes some hard lessons learned. What it takes to bring together, what approaches improve economics and coordination, and where the remaining barriers still exist. The value of this effort is not any single project, it's what we've learned about what it takes to make integrated DERs work in practice. The opportunity going forward is to translate those lessons into tools, policies, and program structures that make it easier for more communities to pursue their own version of an advanced energy community. That was the thinking behind the program, and I think it's incredibly important that we're all here together because this is the real value of what the work we did. It's kind of bringing together all the knowledge, all the lessons learned, and really being able to chart out a path forward. So thank you for your time, and happy to be around to answer any questions. I can take some questions, yeah. Yeah, and we're happy to take questions now. Yeah.
Eric, I know, whether you use a mic. The commission's made a lot of investments, obviously, over this last 5-10 years, and I want to just invite you to highlight a couple things that are really carrying forward the AEC vision, perhaps under other branding, thinking of things like DSGS, the VPP Flex, other initiatives, because there's been, I think, a really strong alignment, and I'd love to hear more about where your thinking is on this going forward.
Yeah, and one thing that comes to mind was this was our first design build competition. We did a second one that was more focused on mixed use development, but we took a lot of what we learned through this first phase and applied it towards that. I think also the learnings from this have informed other efforts in the R&D division, like you mentioned, the Flex Hub. And so, like I said, I'm not an R&D anymore, so I don't have as much insights as to what the current thinking is. I'll turn it over to Anthony for some of those questions, but just going back to the most recent CPUC decision, and I think it's maybe not directly called out, but a lot of the elements from this AEC vision is embedded in how they spelled out some of their objectives, specifically with affordability in mind.
Eric, I just wanted to thank you and the team that put all of this together for giving us this opportunity. It's really been amazing. But I wanted to think a little bit about what's changed in that 10 years and talk to us a little bit about, was that original vision truly calibrated to what we've got going on today? Have there been significant changes would you do anything differently if you were doing this today?
I think there are some things we do differently on how we structured the design build competition. I think one of the biggest challenges we face is we almost had to run it as two separate solicitations. So there was a big break. And so I think some of the teams lost momentum during that break. We were able to fix that with our second design build competition. What's changed in 10 years is just, behind the meter storage, electric vehicles, solar PV was already kind of ubiquitous, but these other technologies, heat pumps, their market penetration levels are, it was still a question 10 years ago, whether these technologies would ever reach widespread adoption. And now that question no longer exists. Now it's just more, how do we really optimize their value and what are the underlying technologies and tools we need to do that? One thing I forgot to mention is just, at least for us in turn, I think we really saw the value of the planning grants come to fruition. And the one comes to mind is, I think, Department of Energy under the previous administration was really interested, their loan programs office, in being able to finance VPPs. And I think one of our conversations with them after we had helped facilitate some calls with the 4 projects, they said these were the best designed VPP concepts they had ever seen, and they were looking at a lot. So I think it just goes to show how these planning grants weren't big money. I think they were $1 million each, but they had really big impact that goes beyond just the dollar value.
A questioner, I think we're ready to transition. So this was like what started out as the theory. Now we can hear what actually happened.
Glad to hear it.
Anthony Ng and everyone else coming up. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thanks if I can invite my fellow panelists on the stage today. So good morning, everybody. I'm Anthony Ng. I'm the manager of the Technology and Innovation and Entrepreneurship branch. So we're actually the successor of EDMFO. That's what the name change turned into. And so first off, I wanted to thank everybody. I wanted to thank Richard, Chris, Yanaro, and Therese here for organizing the event. I was with Eric back in 2015 when we had the original ideas for the solicitation, and I was actually the original phase 1 project manager for the Eco Block. So it's personally really satisfying for me to getting to this stage where research takes a long time, and especially with those COVID years, there's a lot of delays. And so this is really just just personally satisfying to be able to see the results here now that we're at this stage where we can really talk about the projects with a wider audience. I also want to give a lot of credit to Eric, who really had the ideation, the original inception for these ideas. Back then, like you said, 10 years ago, the landscape was quite different. And in some ways, it's strange how relevant, the challenges that we identified back then still are. And I think that kind of shows the forward thinking that Eric and Lorraine here, also in the audience, had at the time. So really, really happy to be part of that team as well. Eric covered a lot of the background, so I thought that was really well done. And I want to save most of the time for kind of going over the projects. The only thing I wanted to mention, just a little bit forward looking. So, the projects that were funded here did come out of our electric program investment charge program, our main R&D program here at the CEC, focused on energy, electricity related R&D. Epic's still going strong, right? So we're here actually wrapping up our 4th investment plan. Right now, we're kind of the last few solicitations coming out of that program, and we're right now planning for our next investment plan, Epic 5, which is going to cover 2026 out to 2030. And so the timing of the event is actually quite fortuitous. The ideas and the challenges that we're talking about here, still relevant, right? If anything, really more so the idea of community scale decarbonization, scaled deployment of technologies is more relevant than it ever has been, especially in the affordability context, right? How do we do these things affordable without raising rates, without stressing the grid, without over investing in costly infrastructure, and on and on. So certainly really relevant for us here at the CEC. I have a couple of team members here that'll be here throughout the day too. So really encourage folks to connect with them, connect with me. We're really here to learn as well as we kind of chart the next stage of our investments. About another $150-ish million a year here for the next 5 years. So a lot more work to be done here. Okay, but to get this panel off, as Eric mentioned, we had about 12 planning grants that we down selected to 4 projects that we funded to actually build, and the 4 here are represented today. So happy to introduce Anaro Bugarin, Director of Energy Innovation at the Clean Energy Coalition, Richard Shorsky, Founder and Executive Director of the Zero Net Energy Alliance, Kristen Terry, Founder and Principal of Community Energy and Equity Resources, and Therese Pfeffer, the Associate Director of the California Institute for Energy and Environment at UC Berkeley. So format for the panel, we'll go over a high-level kind of overview of the project and talk about results. In between each presentation, we'll take about 1 or 2 questions just to kind of wrap up each session. And after all 4 presenters, we'll have a good chunk of time at the end to do just more open Q&A and discussion as well. So that's how we'll go here. So let's see. I think, no, you're starting us off here.
Okay. I'm going to just take a minute and ask that we pause and acknowledge that, the next deep dives are going to be a little messy, right? This is where the learning happened, but this is where we're going to actually get into the weeds a little bit. So bear with me. I'll kind of tell you the story, and then I'll invite you to kind of share questions so that we can build on that story together as a team. So speaking of teams, this happened with the support and the commitment from a lot of people, policy agency, public agency partners, people that complemented our funding. The technical and community advisory committees were instrumental to providing feedback and input. And then we had like 20 plus partners, a lot of changes. It is a simple kind of flag of logos there, but the commitment over more than 5 years is incredible. So okay, so what is this project? So it is referred to as BASE, or Bassett Avocado Heights Advanced Energy Community, or BASE for short. It grew from unincorporated areas of Bassett and Avocado Heights, which is there on the map on the left hand of the screen, and grew to the adjacent cities over time. Definitely a heavily polluted, high pollution burden area, low income for sure. Our approach was defined by a portfolio of strategies across a number of different things, as you see on the image there, and I'll dig into that a little more as we move forward. And then the goals, the simple way to think of the goals that we had was essentially to
think about how we meet demand locally, right? And how do we do that? How do we use a portfolio of strategies approach to community transformation? I'll try to, kind of highlight that as we go forward. But, we really want to think about community, not market transformation. There's a lot of sort of differences on that. We were very, very keenly focused on the low income households, right? Those that are most disadvantaged and harder to reach. And then we were thinking hard about like, okay, well, this is great, right? But how do we scale it, right? How do we do more of this? How do we not, to Eric's point, have this be a one-time, thing? So the next couple of slides, just as a quick, results of the various strategies. First, on our residential solar storage and decarbonization, which we call advanced homes. In 46 homes, we did solar. In 45 homes, we did batteries. That together, it's about 1 megawatt hour of battery capacity. We were forced to think through the innovation of a bridge financing for SCHIP to make things work. And so that 359,000 is actually private money that came into the fold. We did electrification upgrades, all kinds of end uses across the homes in 53 homes, 78 different end uses. And it was all at no cost to the homeowners. And so we had to stack different funding sources and different incentives to make that happen. So that's a little sandwich there. We then asked ourselves, so, part of this is, well, what is the ultimate goal, right? And that goal of sort of thinking about meeting demand locally, we engaged in this sort of simulation of what if none of the regulation challenges that we have now and our policies and limitations that we have now were in place, and we just shared electrons, right? And we were able to supply and demand locally and buy and sell as we needed. Well, in borrowing from overseas, and there's a little tag there at the top, by the way. There's going to be a deep dive on this topic in one of the breakout sessions, so that's going to be the flag there. But we learned through this process of a simulation that there's an additional 9% bill of savings that can be realized if we just reformat and rethink about our policy and electricity market. So more of that on the breakout. We also did a community solar project. This was the first CAISO DER aggregation front of the meter market resource that served 360 or approximately 360 households with a 20% bill discount. It is a CPUC program that we leveraged, but we had to work with Edison, with CPA, with CAISO to integrate 2 different rooftop solar projects into an integration agreement with a utility, and then dispatching out of the CCA into CAISO. So quite a bit of a curve there, but it was noted by CAISO as the first of its kind, and it follows the vision of the FERC 2222. And so more to come there, and also a deep dive later on the breakout sessions. We did EV chargers at 36 EV chargers. 30 of those were at local schools and 6 at homes. Interestingly, those homes had level 2 chargers that were accessible and publicly available for people. And the idea there is that homeowners can actually sell that and be able to make a little bit of money on that. So we piloted that a little bit. We did zero emissions mobility. We actually did a lot of trials on this to see what the needs of the community were. Well, van pool was a thing that we tried, and it didn't really work. Well, it was a big van, as you see on the image there, but yeah, no one wanted to drive that van. It was hard to park, right? It was difficult to move around. So, and then we did a fixed route micro transit path, which also created a lot of challenges, and that didn't work. We ended up doing a very successful car share model, and you can see there the car, and that added transportation access and increased the overall adoption of and awareness of the value of the EV for a lot of households and a lot of families, and so that was really cool. We did the design of a resilience center, which took many years, but did not happen for a number of reasons. And I think we learned a lot from the things that don't work, and so happy to share more of those learnings as a breakout as well. But we went through a 60% design, vetted sites, vetted a lot of options, designed and buy-in of the stakeholder process was interesting. But at the end of the day, we ran out of time. We lost the momentum, and a lot of the some barriers that we weren't able to overcome did not make that happen. We thought really hard about what does this all mean for air quality and for the non-energy benefits. We did ambient air quality, we did tailpipe emissions air quality monitoring, as well as indoor air quality. lots of actually, insights to take away from there. But I think that one that I'll mention is that for people in the home, right, that indoor stove gas conversion to induction was actually like, even though people did not understand what all of those little graphs and all those bulletins were, the fact that they can see and understand that pollution, is being, remedied was an important, factor for people, right? So regardless of the science, just seeing it there was important for people. Okay, so moving on to community outreach, again, a breakout session that will go into more depth on this, but we really wanted to concentrate on authentic partnerships with the community. We know and talk a lot about trust, but it only happens when you partner with community, and that trust comes out of doing the work, right? It's not going to happen regardless otherwise. And so we wanted to partner with them early and throughout, and provide turnkey and wraparound services, and use all the variety of strategies that we needed to. A lot of outreach with from lots of different organizations, and that led to the small sample of people served there. Again, small relatively speaking, but we were doing the difficult work that hopefully is helping us pave the way to larger and scalable strategies. So please, if you're interested in community outreach, Natalie Espinosa from our team is going to be speaking to that panel later. We have a video that you can see later. So just a little reminder that we wanted to capture the perspectives of our partners and our participants. So you'll see that later. And then now I'm going to go into a little bit of challenges and lessons learned. I honestly struggle, right? Because, because I have 2 minutes, but also because, it's been 5+ years, and, lots of learnings. And how do we capture that and give you one takeaway? And so I'm going to give you 5, and I'm going to go very fast and not go into details, but we can get into that a little bit later, right? So obviously the distrust, I spoke a little bit about that later or earlier, and the need to differentiate ourselves from others and build partnerships with communities so that trust can happen. The portfolio strategies, did help. All of our services were at no cost, but we learned that free is not enough, right? People don't necessarily adopt things because they're at no cost or free. And we will do that later.
Every time.
And also, positive NPV is not enough either, right? So even within our resilience center, and the fact that this was a great project, funded with the CEC dollars, funded by SGIP, cash flow positive from day one, right? Better than okay, well, that if it means more work for the for the facility manager, if it means that it's added to the load of somebody else, that's not going to work. And so a lot of thoughts about how we tackle that, right? Because what makes sense on pencil doesn't make always sense in real life. So I'm gonna be brief here, but just bear with me as we manage the time. There was a lot of tension between our for-profit partners and how they operated. What we can all recognize are for-profit businesses that they need to make money. That's what they're corporations, and their short-term gains, and the difficult work that we had to do to make things happen in this difficult kind of households and communities that are under-resourced and understaffed. Highlight there is 10 partner changes, 3 business closures over the time, right? And that's just people who were there. Yes, I'll help you, but at the end of the day, they're they were not able to meet us where we needed them to. And so finding that mission alignment, working towards long-term solutions where we can do, have the impact and focus on long-term underlying challenges so that we can have success is critical. And so that's one of the lessons learned. Number 4 here is reimbursable rebates, extensive cyber remediation costs. Like, how do we deal with this, right? Like, the fact that rebates are there, it's great, but if they're not going to come until the end of the project, that's a challenge. And so that's where our SGIP bridge financing, came through to solve for that problem. But we have to be creative, and we need to think through long term and find those mission aligned partners. And we're playing with this sort of idea and concept of a shared infrastructure, right? That bridge financing facility that we had was tied to one of our partners that went out of business, Well Energy, but the concept is there, right? So if we created this facility, then it can serve for everyone. It doesn't just have to serve this project. And that notion of a shared infrastructure, as we do things going forward, if everyone is thinking similarly, that shared value, right? I think we can address some of the larger problems. Another one here is the lack of data access. I don't think that anyone's going to disagree with that. And the interoperability of DERs. We learned very early on that standards are not sufficient, are only the beginning. We wanted to connect our water heaters and found out that, just because they meet the standard doesn't mean that they're going to be connected, and that, there's the little dongles that only a couple companies make. And okay, what does that mean? So really thinking about that, thinking about the grid services value, a big promise, right, as we understand, but making it count, making it show up is a different story. So really thinking about how we make data access work for everybody. So I'll leave you with this sort of guiding principle. It is difficult. It will be difficult, but as we think through those difficult problems, we can think about getting to a tipping point after which things become a little easier. So our community transformation doesn't have to be that we, decarbonize every household in the community. We just need that few, right? That 3%, 5%, or whatever it may be, right? And then after that, things become a little more possible. So let's focus on that. All right.
Thanks, Naro. Great start to the overview. And I really think that speaks to the value of broad teams and how many players it really takes to kind of get something like this off the ground. So yeah, we'll take a quick 5 minutes, see if there's any, one or two burning or clarifying questions before we move on to our next presentation.
Thank you. Genaro, I was wondering if you could just say a little bit more about, for the community solar portion of the project, what was the community about that? In other words, did it bring revenues into the community? Was it owned by a local co-op or something? What was the community aspect of that beyond just having a resource that participates in the ISO?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the community aspect, I would define it as the fact that it was local to the community. So it was within a few miles of those homes being served, right? And so we can imagine economic development happening if more of that happens. Unfortunately, that CPC program that required that local sponsorship and local kind of having a project where the load meets needs are was closed down, right? It did not succeed the iteration of these programs. And I think we have to really ask ourselves sort of why do we need to continue to have projects be farther and farther away from the load, right? It was a challenge for us, and it only happened because of the grant. And there's maybe 2 or 3 or more in the state, and then the CPC closed down the program. So there's definitely some challenges in funding and the community engagement piece and the community sponsorship piece of community solar that that we need to work on more. Yeah.
Please speak closer to the mic.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do one more question and
Okay.
then we'll move to the next presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that great presentation and work. I'm wondering, what do you need policy-wise from the state to be successful in the next 10 years? In 1 minute or less.
A lot of what I said and shared was the challenges of community engagement and getting buy-in from stakeholders. A lot of people, right, as individuals in the community, we have lots of things to worry about and concerns in life, and those in our critical facilities and whatnot have again a lot of work, and so we need more funding on that aspect of it first and foremost, and I think the other thing that I would say is the data access, right? It has a ripple effect, right? There's multiple dimensions of having data and what we can do with that. I think more sessions will get into that, but yeah.
All right, thanks. We'll have more time at the end here, but let's see. Next is Therese with EcoBlock.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, I'll try not to wave too much. Okay, so the Oakland Eco Block is a neighborhood or block scale energy retrofit. I think a couple differences are, this is not a DAC. We were a priority population. We're a half-mile away from low-income DAC, but we were not a DAC. So that was one of the key differences. I want to start by acknowledging the fantastic team that helped put this together. So not just our community partners such as the City of Oakland, our other Advanced Energy Community members here. That was a fantastic partnership, learning from each other. The sponsorship from CEC, thank you, as well as EPA, PG&E, and other utilities, a great research team from UC Berkeley up the hill, and then, 4 lawyers, 2 contractors, several engineers, business consultants, and many others that helped make this happen. So in terms of our goals, yes, reduce greenhouse gases, focusing on existing older urban homes, right? 70% of Oakland is with homes were built before the energy codes, right? And so really focusing on that. Often lower income owners don't have the funding to do retrofits, and wanted to save embodied carbon. Providing solar energy upgrades, shared e-mobility. We wanted to leverage economies of scale. What can you do by aggregating homes on a block? Lower construction costs, bulk purchasing, and so forth, and activate and strengthen the community. So community-owned rooftop solar, education, and focusing on their quality of life. Improve sustainability, such as trees and reduced stormwater. And providing, we don't want to just do one, we want to prepare this path to scale. So we want to help other eco-blocks happen. Our strategies, our team was basically formed around these 4 major strategies. One, the social. The block was self-nominated. We had a community liaison. We held multiple block parties, provide tangible benefits. And then I mentioned the solar. On the technology side, the work done inside the home, so home energy upgrades, stormwater mitigation, tree planting. We designed a microgrid, did not implement it. We designed a curbside EV charger and EV car share, but did not implement it. On the financial side, Kate will talk this afternoon about business models, very detailed operation and maintenance plan and insurance, and then again, figuring out how to scale without the capital from the Energy Commission. And on the regulatory and legal side, working with PG&E on the microgrid, creating a light homeowners association, and trying to work with the City of Oakland on how can we improve permitting to make this happen, facilitate the next one. On the community engagement side, really important to activate the neighbors. Again, we'll be talking about this afternoon. Building trust, having the blocks self-organize and self-nominate was a key part of this, and provide opportunities for communities to volunteer and lead. Again, more in the breakout. Working with a community liaison is what we did, but there's certainly a lot of room for community-based organizations to be a part of this. Fostering two-way discussion, education, providing translation and interpretation, which we did in both Chinese and Spanish, and using a consensus method to understand the objections so we could come to consensus on a lot of the different decisions we needed to make, where to locate the EV charger and so forth. And really key was to provide opportunities for neighbors to talk to each other. This is how we were able to get those hard-to-reach customers on the block. Here's an overview of the block. It is a cul-de-sac, and so we have a creek on one side. You can see we did, the houses in blue are the ones that participated. So we had 15 properties participate, 25 units, mix of single family and low residential. This is 72% of California housing is 1 to 4 units, right? So this is that sweet spot, fairly small lot sizes. On the finance business models, the grant money funded the energy upgrades. Right. We did not feel loans were appropriate for low-income households. We developed a lot of potential business models that you see this afternoon, leveraging economies of scale, rebates, looking at tariffed on-bill financing for the work done inside the homes, considering things like third-party energy as a service, right, both for what's inside the homes and then outside the homes. And Kate will talk about that. Community ownership and governance was a part of our business model with the microgrid, looking at homeowners association fees covering the costs of the microgrid. Curbside EV charger was part of that, the rooftop solar. Rich will talk about this in the breakout. And then working with a company called Ivy Energy to share the solar credits and to figure out those fees, equitable fees to cover the costs. So now I'm going to go through the 4 different technology bits here: inside the home, outside the home, water, and mobility. So working with inside the home, electrification, right? Fuel switching, using exhaust fans really to improve air quality. Air sealing and insulation was key where we could. There's cases where we could not. So both flavors of heat pumps, balancing airflow and new ducts. And we did upgrade the service both at the panel and then the capacity. Maybe don't need to do that for the next one, but that's what the microgrid kind of drove that decision. So speaking of the microgrid, we designed this. The idea is that PG&E would own and operate the overhead wires, transformers, protected devices, that if there were a power outage in Oakland, they would flip that switch, the switch gear there, and then the rooftop solar and the battery, central battery, grid forming inverter would form this microgrid to supply lights and heat and all that to the homes on the block. Not everybody, and as well as the EV charger. And we had both front of the meter and behind the meter solar and battery, just again, kind of kicking the tires. What can a behind the meter battery do for your transformer health, right? And not all houses needed to join, at least theoretically. The utility told us they could flip the switch on the non-participating households. So what we implemented was the rooftop solar. On the water side, so there's a number of different things we did. A laundry to landscape irrigation workshop, which you see the picture there. Great team builder. The biodetention swale, we got funding from the EPA to support this at the end of the block. We removed 1,000 square feet of concrete in the sidewalk planting strips, which we were able to mulch. We planted 6 trees, and then we got 20 people out to plant the end of the stormwater facility there you see on the right. On the mobility side, we worked with the community to figure out, where in the block would we put this. We found a company called It's Electric that works with the homeowner, so you don't have to have a new dedicated meter for your EV charger on the curb, that you could sub-meter, and the cord stays with the car. This spot was not open to the public. The parking spot would not be open to the public. We wanted to maintain it for the block, and the city wouldn't dedicate the parking spot for shared EV, so that didn't quite work out. When we surveyed folks on the block, they said that they would get rid of it, like 60-some%, said they would get rid of a second car if we could provide a dedicated local car share. But it was difficult to find a car share company that would work with a private group like this. So that didn't end up working out either. Challenges and barriers. Decarbonization is a tough sell. There are language barriers. On the technology side, there are, I think, still issues I find with home energy management systems. If it's all connected to Wi-Fi, what happens if you have a renter? What happens if people can't afford Wi-Fi? Those kinds of things. Reliability, if people are used to having gas heating and cooking, then if you fuel switch without having a battery, then what, right? You're removing something that they're relying on. We had a number of knob and tube wiring systems on the block, expensive to replace. Financially, the microgrid was expensive in this location and was not valuable for resilience in the sense that there weren't very many power outages in this area. So hard to sell. Fun for research, but we couldn't make that pencil out. The rebate programs change, run out of money, hard to keep track of. Some people's bills did increase, especially folks that had uninsulated homes and after electrification, but before solar. On the regulatory legal side of things, I'm sure a lot of people have the same issues, non-conforming existing conditions, right? People are really concerned that the city is going to come in with their unpermitted work and charge them or fine them or something. Legal documents such as the net energy metering was not available in languages other than English. So I think that's a big problem, especially with the hard to reach. Potential rent increase, the renters were concerned that there'd be a rent increase after improvements. Oakland has a rental control, so that helps. We thought that aggregating all the applications, whether it's permits or the service upgrade applications, that there would be a benefit there. We're aggregating them, right? But the systems were just not ready for that yet. So something to work on. Homeowners are nervous about property tax increases, right? So something we need to worry about. I'm going to keep moving here. So the lessons learned, it should be easier and cheaper to electrify together than rather by yourself. We do think engaging the community is a really key part of this. This is now my favorite quote: change moves at the speed of trust. really believe this. I think tangible projects really help. These are easy to see. Solar and electrification is hard to see, but when you plant a tree, that's what becomes the eco block, right? Addressing quality of life issue, providing education and opportunities for neighbors to talk to each other is really key. We really think bundling home performance along with electrification is important. Trying next time, I think trying to do low power electrification when possible, so to not have to upgrade the panels, we think is important. Leveraging those economies of scale, which we did achieve in this project, both bulk purchasing, lower prices for half the roofs we had to replace. We did see that, leveraging the economies of scale, and preserving the existing housing stock just for addressing equity and other issues. So with that, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Therese. All right, yeah, take a couple of minutes here for a couple of questions for Therese.
No question. Just wanted to have Kurt run across the room. No, just kidding. Getting Kurt is exercise. Excellent presentation. So much resonates. You mentioned right at the end, you had to replace some roofs, and that's something that Alexandra at MCE, we do a lot of electrification, energy efficiency programs. Roof replacements are so difficult, and we haven't been able to tap into additional funding to weave together to support the customer in this. How did you get over that funding hurdle for the roof replacements?
Honestly, we ended up doing fewer. I mean, we had to do some value engineering, and at one point we had to decide, okay, we're not doing water efficiency anymore, and so it came out of the project funding, and we just had to make some hard decisions. But we agree that you have to replace the roof, and yeah, half the roofs had to be replaced before solar.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. One thing I remember you mentioning was streamlining the permitting process. I know that you had mentioned that aggregating didn't prove to be effective, but any other lessons learned for working with local jurisdictions to streamline that process? Because I'm sure a lot of people know it's a pain in the butt. So.
Yeah, really good question. Is Melanie here? So we have a dedicated person, the person in the back, they're waving her hand. We have a dedicated person from the city of Oakland who is now working on that process. And so our project is, we still have through November. I think the other projects are ending sooner than that, but our project will continue on through November. And so that is one of the things that we will be looking at, is how do we, in fact, we have a workshop next week with the city of Oakland to talk about these issues with the different departments there, and to work through that. And I guess the other main issue would be working with PG&E. We have talked about working with PG&E to see what they could do about aggregating. So, discussions to come, but I don't know that I have any answers right now.
Great. Yeah, let's do one more here. So those are quick responses. So let's do one more.
Quick one, Terry. You probably know where I'm going with this, but what were the challenges you had with weatherization? Because I think of weatherization as a precursor to electrification. So so how do we scale weatherization, right? Insulation, air sealing, window replacements. Did you have any lessons learned around that area?
For the home performance part, insulation and air sealing?
Performance part, yeah.
Yeah, we do find it's very important, and maybe the issues are more relevant to in terms of showing people that you're going to have much larger systems. So bills are going to be higher if you don't do that. I don't know what the process is for that. I do think that there are some rebates. We weren't able to find any rebates to help us with that piece of it. Yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer for you.
All right, thanks, Therese. We'll save more questions for the Q&A session at the end. But for now, let's go to Lancaster and Richard.
Thanks so much. I just want to acknowledge we've got our two representatives from Lancaster Choice, Lancaster Energy, and really appreciate having Cindy and Alice here. They've been our stalwart team. Actually, we've had over 10 years, there's been a lot of turnover at Lancaster Energy. I'll just be blunt about it. And the reality is that when we came into Lancaster Energy, I'm going to go right to the context of our project and our location. Lancaster has been a clean energy leader really on the national stage, frankly, forever. Mayor Rex Paris has been a leader. He is a Republican, but he's a Republican climate hawk and has given really one of the best climate speeches I've ever heard in my life, and I've heard a lot of them, and put his money where his mouth is in terms of actually establishing, first of all, the first solar mandate nationally, brought the BYD e-bus and battery factory into Lancaster, which I think is cresting over 1,000 jobs, basically forefronting clean energy as an economic development strategy, which frankly is a great way to go, and a lot of folks miss that, and this has been a city that really gets it. So in addition, they hit a ZNE threshold as a city on a net basis over a course of a year, all the way back in 2019, also the first to achieve that. And what we're excited about, and one of the focus areas of this project, was that they invested, I'll say the number, $400,000 in a statewide license for a VPP platform built by none other than our own Mark Lane here. You want to raise your hand of Serious Controls. Thank you. He deserves that applause because this is the first VPP that was really custom oriented to CCA needs, and is a major highlight of this project and also the companion project in Richmond that ZNEA sponsored with MCE. But what was crucial about the site license is that what we wanted to do was lower barriers for entry for CCAs into the VPP world. And as you know, there's a lot of vendors out there hawking a lot of great platforms which have a lot of features. And as you know, in the SaaS world, vendors love to add features. They love to have lock-in. They love to have a walled garden. And they love a lot of things that are great for the vendor and less great for the community. And less great, frankly, for the market and the ecosystem when you really consider an ecosystem and all the meanings of that term, economic and ecological. So what we wanted to do was have an open ADR-focused platform that would truly represent a lot of interoperability, have a lot of the features of sort of a Linux Foundation approach where we would build a library over time of integrations that could be accessed by all stakeholders and build effectively a community, a learning community, and a community of interop, if you will, among the CCAs and with the CCAs. And so that's a big focus of this project. I'll just mention that Lancaster has also sought to get out in front of the green hydrogen revolution and founded the first statewide public hydrogen energy authority. We blessed them on that journey, but it wasn't the journey that we were on. So I'll just mention that. At any rate, the team, I just want to, frankly, we probably could have done another dozen logos, and I feel a little guilty because all my predecessors had like 25 partners. We probably have 25 partners too, but I just selected the ones that had the biggest and most recent role on the project. So apologies to anybody that's not here. But I think all these, I won't read through the list. I think I've mentioned most of these. TRC, we've got Coleman here. If you want to raise your hand, Coleman. Now doing some really exciting and frankly path-breaking work on M&V. Tier Resource Consultants, I just want to acknowledge Floyd Kneep, the principal and manager there. They're helping us on our what we're calling our accelerator for AECs. And then Mint Systems, a microgrid developer. Is anybody from Mint here? No, okay. But anyway, they came in and really kind of pulled the fat out of the fire on 2 of our microgrid projects, for which we're very grateful. Gridscape Solutions was going to be here. Vipul Gore, many of you know. They did a ton of design and engineering work on a microgrid. It did not happen, and there's a story I will tell about that in full disclosure. And Reimagine Power. Ali, are you here? Raise your hand. Not yet, maybe. But anyway, Ali's on a breakout, and it's going to help us with community microgrid policy going forward. So I just want to, I know many of you here are very, very well aware of things like the Brattle report on VPP that was done, focused on California. And the numbers there are $5 billion a year is possible in savings by 2035. I'll note that that does not include V2G values. A very new study that just came out through the VGI Council has the latest, which is almost $1,200 per year per vehicle for V2G revenue in a VPP bidirectional context. We think that's an incredibly juicy prize. I really almost wanted to say, hey, I didn't know I was in the VTG conference when Ellie stood up, but I want to acknowledge that Kurt and Ellie both have been at the forefront of the VPP mandate, which isn't quite a mandate yet, but literally by 2030, we hope to have bidirectional mandate of some kind that the CEC can pull the trigger on, thanks to the bill that Kurt and Ellie championed. And that's a huge sort of the killer app for the smart grid, as you all know. We did not focus on V2G, but I want to acknowledge that the numbers there are really juicy. And we consider already that there's a huge optimization opportunity with legacy residential batteries. One of the interesting things is that those are all under contract right now, and some of those contracts are not very VPP friendly. Many of them involve third-party aggregators, as you know, that bid into the market in ways that can be contrary to the interests of the CCA and are not transparent in terms of their load profile and how they interact with the CAISO. And I want to acknowledge Chris Santieri here on the panel, who's really drilled down on that from a very technical perspective to look at how those load curves stack. And there's a lot of information and a lot of money involved in those alignments. And so one of the things that we were really struggling with throughout the projects, both projects, is how do we deal with those legacy contracts and how do we create customer loyalty and VPP-friendly tariffs and VPP-friendly contracts as we go forward when new batteries come online, whether residential, commercial, or some kind of hybrid scenario with V2G and so on. So we think that's an absolutely crucial area for further exploration and implementation as we go into the next phase of VPP world and AEC world. And obviously, you know, VPPs have to be affordable and they have to be ubiquitous. So again, we're looking to CCAs transitioning into the role of being an operator and an owner of the VPP. And that does not by any stretch exclude the many third-party aggregators that already exist in the market and with whom we certainly need to collaborate. And one of the things that Mark will be talking about shortly here, Mark Lane from Cirrus Controls, is something he helped frame, which was the idea of an enterprise DERMS, which is within the within the IT framework of a CCA, and a so-called aggregator DERMS, which is basically everybody else that may be in the market. And many of those names are familiar household names in some cases, the Teslas, the Sunruns, you know, later entries, Octopus and Lunar and all of those folks. And we bless all of them in their existence, and we want to have and empower the CCAs to interoperate and have as much transparency, minimally have as much monitoring, and optimally have as much control as is possible with respect to those other assets. Because the alignment of their bidding and the alignment of their market participation in time and in terms of how tariffs work is absolutely crucial to effective load carrying capacity, to getting the maximum value from the wholesale, et cetera. So our thesis is that CCA ownership and control will enhance economic and resilience benefit across all of that. I have managed to use up almost all my time on one slide, but I'm going to catch up, I promise. You know, we built out a lot of community microgrid, 3 large ones in 3 sounding like rather idiosyncratic locations, but I'm going to explain why we did this. And they are under construction, but they're not done yet, so full disclosure. Police department, critical facility, obviously. Lancaster Toyota put their own money into the deal, substantial amount, and we believe and know that they're going to have bidirectional vehicles at some point in the next couple of years, and that will be a huge resource. And so we wanted to be there in part for that. Lancaster Baptist Church is a giant community, 9,000 members, dorms, a university, a K-12 school. I mean, it's literally a whole village unto itself. So we wanted to be there, and they've been a great partner and they already had a megawatt battery, and we're adding more and so on. So it's a massive resilience center in and of itself. I won't get into the whole story on what happened with a large 220 plus unit housing development that the city contracted for with Bridge Housing, a leading affordable housing developer. But we were 2 years in, COVID happened, interest rates effectively doubled. We did easily half a dozen different designs for microgrids, a very innovative network of nanogrids, because Rule 218, so-called over-the-fence rule, which we thought we could somehow do a workaround like EcoBlock, like others, and do some peer-to-peer electron sharing, because the city owned all the parcels. It's like, and they even owned the street. It's like, what could go wrong? Well, just about everything. Very characteristically, not to throw shade, but you know, a lot of the folks at SCE that we initially dealt with were very encouraging. And then as the process went on, they were less and less encouraging. And then we were running out of time. And then we decided we've got to bail. We're not getting any. Ram is knocking, nodding. Is like I've just heard that story before. So and then Bridge Housing said we can't finish this. So we had a long 2-year D&E process, design and engineering process, and we thought, how can we make lemonade out of these lemons? Ali Detrio came in from Reimagine Power and all of our AEC partners, and we said we were all stymied on community microgrids. It was really, we were all in the breakdown lane on a number of community microgrid innovative concepts. And all of the special programs at CPUC and the tariff and all the innovative microgrid thing, none of that worked to actually get us over the finish line. So we wrote a white paper, and we're going to share a lot on that on the breakout. And there's some incredibly exciting concepts, a community microgrid operator framework. It's like a whole level underneath the CCAs, a number of specific policy recommendations. And who knows, we may have a governor who's literally like a microgrid champion coming in. I think many of the candidates will be that. So we think we can get some things going as soon as later this year. So lessons learned, just really quickly. I'm in negative territory here, but you know, for both all of the 2 projects that we sponsored, the challenge is basically integration and kind of getting the stack of customer and grid analytics done in a more efficient, rapid fashion, aligning the incentives in finance. And Ara touched on just how challenging it is to bring in so many finance partners, customer engagement and installation and O&M. And we had to cobble all that together with the CCAs. And we would love to see market actors pre-cobble, if you will. And also, I mean, those CCAs like MCE that have huge capacity to do and build rather than buy that capability, God bless and Godspeed. And I think they're well on their way. But many of the CCAs have literally just a few, like less than 10 FTEs. And that's true for Lancaster, as opposed to the 200 FTEs or whatever it is it's at MCE. So we're looking at a very diverse set of actors, and they will continue to be small and medium and large CCAs forever in California. And so we'd love to see market actors bring that vertical stack and bring the efficiencies of scale that they would bring if they were working, you know, statewide. The distributed capacity procurement model goes right hand in hand with AECs. It's just another frame to say, let's have contracts with those kinds of entities, those vertical entities, to deliver capacity that includes both EE, energy efficiency, and DER on rooftops and on the customer side of the meter. Of course, we'd all love more stable incentives. We'd all love to get rid of permitting and interconnect delays. So that's pretty straightforward. I'm going to skip this. Mark's going to cover enterprise terms, aggregator terms. He's going to cover all this, so I'm going to skip this. This is some deep stuff and wonderful, and I encourage you to go to that breakout. This is my last slide. I'll just say we really do want to revise Rule 218. We really do want to have a CMO designation and have a kind of an entity that is just pushing resilience centers and community microgrids full time every day. Here at AVA, a territory, they were talking about doing 100, 200 microgrids just in their territory alone. Don't think they got there, but you know, thinking that aggressively, robustly is, I think, super, super great. And as battery prices decline, I think hundreds and hundreds of microgrids can take shape in any community. And the Grid of the Future Coalition, I'll just, again, a shout out to Kurt and Ellie. This is the This is a group of DER, everybody. It's CCAs, it's DER vendors, it's advocates, it's cities coming together to do AEC-like good things, and he'll describe the state of play of legislation in that area later today. And finally, I'm going to skip to scaled finance. We do have a process in motion that includes Energy Coalition and other stakeholders to develop regional climate and clean energy bonds. Any of you from SoCal may know of Move LA, which put a lot of bonds on the ballot over the last 10 years or so for transit, water, sustainability things, some clean energy stuff. They were literally in process of a $20 to $30 billion bond with a B, $1 billion a year for 20 or 30 years for this fall's ballot. Polling, infrastructure, community partners, the whole 9 yards. They had to pull it because of the Jarvis initiative that's going to be here for a supermajority requirement on the ballot for any revenue measure, closing lots of loopholes that made it possible to do things for less than 2/3. So this can be on the 2028 ballot. Good news. And we hope to have on the 2028 ballot a companion bond, again, in the billions for the Bay. Maybe who knows what's possible based on polling. That combines clean energy, resilience, fire, which is crucial for voters and for protection, and maybe some water measures depending on the local situation. So we want to have an integrative AEC plus water plus fire safety framing, because we think that's appropriate for kind of a big heterogeneous sustainability understanding, holistic sustainability understanding. So we're going to be working hard on that. We're going to talk more about that later on, but that's enough. That's more than enough. Thank you for the extra time.
All right. Thanks, Richard. Let's do one question, try and make a little bit of time. Any quick questions for Richard on the Lancaster project?
Thanks, everybody. Sam Irvin with MCE. I know a little bit about the project, but there's a story that I think is really kind of interesting, which is you've engaged Richard and team with a significant amount of private property owners, as well as public facilities. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between engaging public property owners when they're thinking about microgrids versus those who are in private facilities? What stories are you telling to get the projects to go forward?
I would expect a very nuanced question. Sam ran these two projects, so he knows a lot about these projects, and he's now doing the same thing at MCE with going forward with their VPP Flex and bringing all this territory wide. So we're incredibly excited and pleased about that. Yeah, you know, the reality is that the great thing about private property owners is that they can, if they see a pro forma that they like, and they recognize that they may need to throw in $500,000 to get, you know, a $2 million ITC or whatever it may be benefit over 10, 15 years. So long as they have long-term ownership of the building, they're likely to go for that. And as long as they think, you know, outside of the box of maybe the 5-year ROI. So we love to deal with, you know, that makes it easier. Decision timelines are shorter often. You know, the pro forma kind of speaks loudly. The public sector is just stranger because sometimes there's more money available, and sometimes it doesn't matter how much money is on the table. If there's a competing priority, then there's a competing priority. So in some cases, we had situations where we thought we had a lot of resources available in the public sector context and a fantastic pro forma, but something else came up and it just like, okay, that's over because we want to do something completely different. You know, the equivalent of, this is not a real world example, but instead of, you know, investing in clean energy, we need to like redo the ball field. So you get those type of dynamics and you're just dealing with all these externalities basically. So, you know, my feeling is we'd like to have the capacity to do both, in the sense of there's some resilience use cases that are so important that they're worth 2-3 years of planning time and waiting for the funding package to come together, and people just need to stay focused. Amazingly, in Lancaster, we had a city hall battery microgridish project that was scoped in 2022 or something like that, and nothing happened. We thought it was dead as a doornail. And Cindy basically a couple months ago said, you know that 2022 project? I said, I think I vaguely remember that. And she said, we're about to make payments on it because we want to get the ITC, and it's like back in motion. We're like, oh, thank God. That's such a great timing. So, I mean, it's just an example of, you got to have a long patience cycle for the public. And, 5-6 year decision cycles and, build and resourcing cycles are not unusual, whereas private sector, a year usually sufficient.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, let's turn it over to Chris, who will wrap us up for our last presentation for this panel.
All right. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me in the back okay? Well, I can't tell you how honored I am to be here today with all of my colleagues and the luminaries you're hearing speaking today. It's been amazing. And I wanted to really just start again with a thank you to the CEC for supporting all these projects and all the flexibility and patience as we work through so many different issues. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of our Richmond Advanced Energy Community Project, which really focused on trying to demonstrate innovative community energy programming, specifically in a severely disadvantaged community. We wanted to provide pathways for low income and other disadvantaged customers to be able to access the benefits from California's energy markets. This has been a longstanding goal of the state, and we really took that challenge to heart. We also wanted to demonstrate a community-focused VPP, a little different kind of an idea. We wanted to implement a comprehensive, heterogeneous, technology agnostic type of a VPP, not a thermostat program, but something that brought batteries and electric vehicles and hot water heaters and other things into the fold. We really wanted to have this broad idea, and we wanted to make sure that that VPP delivered actual value to stakeholders at the community level. And we think that's a little different than what we're seeing with other VPPs. We also wanted to enhance local resiliency related to the grid outages. PSPS events were starting to pick up. Water treatment facilities and emergency facilities were being shut off for 12 and 14 days at a time. This could not stand, and we took that challenge to heart as well. We wanted to find a way to share the value that we were creating with all of this with the customers that were participating, as well as the trade allies or the VPP partners that came to the table and helped us achieve all of this. The key strategies and innovations that emerged as we tried to do this, we are demonstrating a new business model for CCAs, a new way for CCAs to earn revenue and create value for the communities that they serve. That's leveraging their role as a scheduling coordinator to become demand response providers directly. This isn't outsourcing, this is insourcing something very vital. To do that, they really needed an enterprise level piece of software. This didn't exist. This wasn't available. We had Serious Controls come into the team and build this software from scratch, purpose built for CCA applications. This is a very powerful concept. You're going to hear a lot more about that. We also came up with ways to share that value, as I said, including a first of its kind VPP tariff, which was developed to compensate the customers that are participating in very simple, straightforward terms. It's a flat type of a tariff. It does have an M&V and an annual true-up process for C&I customers to pay them fairly for all of the value that was actually delivered to the system. And we think that's new as well. Innovating financing, you've been hearing that a lot today. We had to rely on two really significantly innovative financing mechanisms. One was a social impact bond, and I want to say that bonding is going to be a really important part about scaling these types of programs. We need low-cost capital. That is absolutely essential. The idea that we can get social impact bonds from local banks to help with this, that's a really powerful idea. We also leveraged the revolving loan fund that I helped MCE set up for a previous program. We put that to use in this program, and that offers 0% interest for low-income customers, for example, 2.5% interest for medical baseline and other qualified customers, and 5% for everybody else. All of that's below market rates, and we think that was a critical innovation. I won't spend too much time on this, but this is a really important concept that we brought really both in Lancaster and Richmond. The idea is to put the CCA in the driver's seat for the virtual power plant, to basically have them own that, operate that. We are going to work with many third parties, including other aggregators. This isn't excluding them. As Richard said, this is finding a way to put the CCA in control of that and to let the CCA be able to set the ground rules and make sure that everybody involved is getting some of the value that's created. I won't go into detail, but this does get the CCA into market participation, and it opens up new revenue sources for CCAs, which is very difficult, and I think will be very important moving forward. Again, you're going to hear about this from Mark Lane. We have a breakout session. He's going to go into some detail about this, but I wanted to highlight for this plenary session just how important this enterprise level DERMS concept is. This software was built for CCAs. That means that it will work for CCAs. What we're finding is many of the VPP or DERM softwares that are out there do not work for CCAs. They're very expensive, but they were built for other types of customers like IOU or a DSO who has different types of data, different values it can create, different needs. Those software packages are not working well for CCAs. We had to start from scratch and build something that was calibrated to deal with those problems, and that's what this is. Having it be in the enterprise means that this is not external. This is not in someone else's cloud. The CCA has complete ownership and control and visibility over everything that happens there. And that's fundamentally different and very important in the CCA space. We're using open APIs and communication standards like OpenADR. That reduces cost, increases flexibility, and creates a lot of other values. And very importantly, and I want to give Lancaster some credit for this, the city of Lancaster negotiated a very unique user license with serious controls for this. It's what we call the perpetual user license. And that means all the CCAs who sign up for this, they can get that at a fraction of the price that it costs to get a VPP platform for 1 year. It's about $200,000 for a large CCA, and they get that software in perpetuity. CCAs are paying roughly $1 million a year to get access to someone else's cloud-based software. This is fundamentally different, and we think that is important. We also have Jim Becker from RCF Connects here today. He's going to talk a little more in a different breakout session about something we call the Zero Net Carbon Ready Homes. This was a major program. Some of you were at the event we had in Richmond at one of these homes where we demonstrated how MCE through the DERMS platform had control over all of the assets you're seeing in this picture. We had thermostats, batteries, EV chargers, hot water heaters, and smart appliances all under control of MCE's DERMS. Those were made by different manufacturers. This is the heterogeneous VPP in action. There were so many challenges. You guys, we went through so much. I know that this was a shared experience amongst the 4 teams, and I won't go into detail here. You'll see this in the slide deck if you want to download it later, but I'll just say it was a gauntlet run. Really 7 years of working around these issues, finding pathways to get over them. I will just highlight the access to data issue for CCAs is significant. This has been an issue for 15 years. Those of you who know me know I've been working on that issue for 15 years. We got to change this, you guys. It's really a problem. We want to talk to you about that, and we'll open that up a little more in some of the other settings. I also want to note project site security came up for us. We actually had theft and losses, and this isn't something that we were thinking about when we went into these projects. You really have to have insurance and adequate site security when you're going into these things. We lost a truckload of batteries and other very expensive gear. And so that was a lesson that was hard learned. A few other lessons, this was mentioned, costs are on the increase. I heard someone say that costs are lower than they were when we started. I think that's probably true. The downward trend at that time was very significant, but we hit the global pandemic and a lot of things changed, and I don't see that really recovering. We are seeing prices on the uptick in recent months, and so that's something to note. The idea of financing is going to be key. I mentioned bonding. We've got to get public municipal money into these types of projects to lower the cost and to make affordability a reality for these things. And we got to update the rules and the regulations. 218 keeps coming up. The over the fence rules are really problematic for what we're trying to do. We need some common sense exemptions and some changes to that. All right, I'm almost to the end here. A few of our key outcomes and findings. you know, this new business model for CCAs, this is powerful. I don't know how many people here realize that CCAs are having some difficulties in recent years. The margins are shrinking, the rates are on the rise, and the value prop is starting to evaporate. We believe this new business model is one of the answers to that problem. The idea that CCAs can leverage the demand response mechanisms to be able to generate new revenue, create value, deliver grid services and decarbonization, and let's face it, help customers afford all of these things. That is really critical. The software, again, I'm going to let Mark tell you more about that, but it is absolutely critical. It is scalable. Other CCAs can get that software. Each CCA that works on new use cases basically is benefiting the other CCAs that have that software. We'll do updates. We'll share those. This sets up kind of a co-development paradigm that did not exist before. There's a lot of customer interest in VPPs, even in disadvantaged communities. We have demonstrated and established that. You can connect these community revitalization efforts to the virtual power plants and other things that we're talking about. And we can see neighborhoods come back to life as a result of some of these things. Needing financing options like the revolving loan fund that I mentioned, that's absolutely critical. Just a few more. We've got Coleman here. He's going to talk a little bit about something we're calling FlexCalc. This is something that was an output of our Lancaster and Richmond projects. It was a joint effort between the two, and we have developed a very advanced normalized metered energy consumption performance evaluation methodology that we think is very powerful. This helps us get more out of every kilowatt of load shed in terms of value creation, and it can be used more often throughout a year than the existing methods. And so this captures more of the value that we're actually creating with the virtual power plant, and that's critical. We found that large commercial and industrial customers didn't really like our initial VPP tariff that we set up. It was flat, 11 cents. We pay for every kilowatt hour delivered, and we wanted to dispatch those systems a lot. That tariff is set up to allow us to dispatch a lot throughout the year. We heard from industrial customers, hey, that's not really our game. We want fewer dispatches and a higher number, maybe a dynamic number that changes based on the market value. So we can decide when we come in and we participate. So we're going to be working on dynamic tariffs moving forward for those larger loads. But we found that the flat tariffs worked really well and was compelling for residential and small, medium businesses. So we're going to keep those around and we're going to continue that. We may make some adjustments, but that's working very well. I mentioned here the modified proxy demand resource. This is a discussion at the ISO, and I want to thank the ISO for providing what's called the DDEMI working group. I forget what the acronym is, but we are engaged in a conversation with the ISO about changing some of those rules. We've got to open this up. The proxy demand resource rules right now do not allow batteries to export their full amount. We're trapped at the load at the meter, and that has to change in order for us to get the full value out of all of these things. So we're in active dialogue with the ISO about that. We're looking to pilot a modified proxy demand resource. And in fact, we have a whole lot of data and findings to support that. And lastly, I want to give Mark Lane and Sirius Control some credit for this. We came up with a really compelling offering for multifamily property owners that I think is very important. It couples EV charging with batteries and the virtual power plant concept to essentially enhance the business case for charging at multifamily properties. What we're finding is there's a lot of traction for this idea. Multifamily property owners really need some help to help increase the value of all of this. There are mandates for them to install these chargers. They also, many of them have existing solar that's going to get termed out and go into NEM 3.0. So having this type of an approach is really timely and can really help those property owners make this transition with us. So I think that's all I have. Be happy to take some questions if you have them.
All right, thank you, Chris. And yeah, how about another round of applause for the whole panel here? Really great. Okay, so I think great timing, everybody. This is quite amazing, actually. I think we have our 30 minutes allotted for some open Q&A. So yeah, I'll just open the floor. Yeah, we got a mic runner, and so.
Yeah, and just a program note, if you could mention your organization when you ask your question as well. I failed to note that sooner. So
yeah, so gentleman in the back over there. Yeah.
Can we start up here in front just because I.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for that presentation. My name is Do-hee Kim, and I'm a campaign organizer with Local Clean Energy Alliance. Nice to see you in person. So I went to the board meeting yesterday for Ava Community Energy, and they're talking about the launch of a virtual power plant program, more focused on the residential side. And what I think is really compelling about your model is like the revenue generation within CCA and not outsourcing to third parties, but also the heterogeneity of that model. But they mention like resilience hubs being very difficult. I think because of their also heterogeneous nature of like site-specific design and storage, and they mention like legal complications. I noticed your case studies focused a lot on just exciting like residential cases, but have you been exploring different sizes and types of resilience hubs in Richmond? Any barriers towards connecting resilience hubs to this model that you're launching?
It wasn't actually as much of a focus for the Richmond project, but I want to say, Richard, in the Lancaster project, we had a very significant focus, particularly on microgrids, but also this concept of resiliency hubs or centers. We came up with a concept midway through to turn the downtown area into what we called a resiliency zone, central resiliency zone in the downtown area, which had that police department, a fire station, some multifamily housing, all in reasonable kind of proximity. So we wanted to turn that downtown area into a resiliency center or hub. And I would say that funding was a major obstacle. The over the fence rules that have been mentioned, 218 and Rule 18 are coming up and stopping this type of, over the fence microgrids where we're sharing electrons. So what we found is we had to design smaller microgrids, keep the electrons on a certain property and not share them over the property boundaries. We managed to get a few of those approved, and we're working on building those now. I don't know if Richard maybe wants to add a little bit from that.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak to the Richmond case a little bit, we did not have public facilities in the Richmond microgrid scenario as yet. However, as many of you know, Chevron is both a challenge for Richmond from a public health perspective, and in some respects, there's some economic benefits. Most recently, they have a new settlement which has a very interesting political history, but about $55 million a year is going to be coming in over the next 10 years. And one of the targets is clean energy and other things. But we're guardedly optimistic that they're going to both want to do certainly some resilience-oriented stuff. We're in a dialogue now about, outside of this project context, but about doing some public housing with solar and storage and EV charging and other things. And I think, that's what we're trying to do is, to the point that somebody was asking about, private money and public and what have you, we'd love to see that actually be administered as a revolving fund and focus on those pro formas that actually pay back. So we're targeting a 6% interest rate that we think is doable for, say, both affordable and market rate multifamily. Not so sure about resilience hubs, but in effect, a public housing setting that might have some decent sized community rooms and so forth could function as a resilience hub. And when we talk about pro formas that actually work now with the ITC that's in place, that's 50 to 70% if you safe harbor by July. And after that, it goes down to maybe 30%. We'll see what happens for the next couple of years. That's tougher. But nonetheless, we think we can get a lot of microgrid or microgrid-ish things done for both public and privately owned buildings in Richmond specifically. So we're looking forward to doing more with that.
Yeah, next question. Anybody?
I think there was somebody else in the back right here. Thank you. Yeah, it's okay.
Hi, thank you for that. My name is Stephen Coleman. I'm with Redwood Coast Energy Authority up north. And my question about VPPs, we look into them every once in a while, and some consultant or another is coming by us, like trying to pitch one, every once in a while. And we have a very small customer base and very small load, not much of a heating load in the summer. And so it's always been difficult to make the idea of a VPP pencil out with the upfront and administrative costs. And I'm wondering if there's any recommendations. And I was excited about some of the things you're starting saying about like pooling costs between CCAs. And if you could go into that, any more of ways that we can make it, because our customers have below state average income. We're we're not a DAC because of air quality. We were blessed with nice air quality up there, but very much so in terms of a lot of tribal communities, a lot of small dispersed rural communities, and would love to figure out ways to make VPPs work, but haven't been able to pencil out those costs.
Well, I want to say, I think that the virtual power plant concept is very flexible. I believe that a virtual power plant could be constructed that makes sense for most communities, really. And it really, you have to take into account the account mix and the load, and many things go into that. But I think and I know a fair amount about the Redwood Coast area. I know a little bit about, for example, the microgrid at the airport. And I want to suggest that many of us believe that was an opportunity to connect something to a virtual power plant. I know that through the process that happened with PG&E, maybe that wasn't discussed or explored at the time, but that asset, those sets of assets would be wonderful components of a virtual power plants. And if you're doing more of that kind of work in that area, those types of assets make beautiful assets for virtual power plants. So it doesn't have to be thermostat programs and residential batteries and these kind of things. And in fact, I've been telling our partners that focusing on that is the slowest way to get to scale. Focusing on the industrial and the large commercial loads is a much more cost-effective way to get these things to scale and work. And it sounds like maybe in your community that would be, something to explore.
Thanks. Okay, let's go there, and then let's go to Commissioner McAllister after.
Okay, now it's on. My name is Chris Seelig. I'm from Poder, which is an EJ organization based in San Francisco. Always really fun to hear examples of on-the-ground implementation projects. We do that stuff, so it's always fun to hear other people talk about it. So one of the things that we've bumped up against, which is a little bit outside of what you guys talked about, but I thought I'd ask in case you had a solution, which is like how to get solar and battery benefits to individual units in particularly what people call naturally occurring or really unsubsidized affordable housing, working class housing. Because I think we talked to like 15 different engineers, and NEM seems like it's totally blocking any of our ability to get those benefits to tenants. And I just want to know if anybody has like a pathway forward or a solution or a way to like solve for that, because that's kind of a deal breaker for our work.
Yeah, I really appreciate your bringing up that sector because, as you know, the HUD type housing or deed restricted affordable housing is for folks typically at 30% of the folks who are required to only provide 30% of the rent, and they're typically the poor, in the poverty zone versus asset limited, folks that are employed but may not be able to afford anything and are have $400 in the bank. There's just giant numbers of those folks in almost every area of California, and it's very, very tough to get clean energy benefits to them as well. So I'll just mention that the property owner is the crucial decision maker because of the fact that tenants don't have any money to invest in these resources, and they also may not be there long enough. And of course, property owners typically, many commercial property owners don't pay the bill. They typically only pay the bill for the common area. So we know that is called the split incentive problem. And so it's a real challenge from a structural business model perspective of how you deploy clean energy assets, whether it's efficiency or DERs into apartment buildings. There are two solutions that we're really excited about. We didn't happen to have the opportunity to deploy them in these projects, but we're very active with both of these entities. I'll mention first is just the business model concept that is called the Metered Energy Efficiency Transaction Structure. MEETS is the acronym. It's a coalition of stakeholders that have piloted this innovation over a number of years, starting with Seattle City and Light. And basically what it does is it suggests that if you create a master lessee arrangement in a building, they call it an energy tenant, a project developer contracts with the building owner over a 10 to 20 year period and says, will you allow me to create a DER project and an EE project in your building and sell the resulting energy supply or the energy use reduction, we call them distributed energy units or efficiency energy units, to sell those back to the utility in a packaged approach where it transacts just like a supply PPA, just like a solar PPA. It's a very brilliant concept, but it requires on-bill payment and some kind of on-bill integration. Ideally, that's the best way to do it. So that the energy cost, there's an energy cost reduction for the tenant, might be 10% is the goal. And there's a value in doing that long-term contract structure of 10 to 20 years because you can afford to do a whole building deep energy retrofit, not just screen skimming of lights and that kind of thing. So in those settings, if you have 10 to 20 years, it typically like heat pump HVAC will pencil when it will never pencil in a 5 to 7 year ROI structure that most private investors require. So we think this is a hugely important innovation. It solves a good number of problems, and knock on wood, on the way here, we understand CPA, Clean Power Alliance at LA County has signed an initial statement that says we are going to be doing this for multifamily property owners as a pilot program. They ran an innovation RFP last summer that we participated in to get that program launched and experimented with. So we hope to have some good results on that. And we're working there with a company called PowerTree that focuses just on multifamily residential, solar energy storage, and shared EV charging 100% behind the meter. So no interconnect required, no battery output back to the grid. It's all self-consumption, and it takes the energy load down by about 70% in a building, and it adds EV charging, so that's a pretty amazing stat. You can layer in EE if you want to in that, and what that does is it basically provides, again, about a 10% reduction for the tenant, and it shares the benefits of the solar, on-site solar and battery storage managed like a local VPP or like a local microgrid, if you will, just within those apartment buildings. And it's a fantastic business model and everybody benefits. And there again, the utility, optimally, if the utility is involved, they would do on-bill payment. There's ways to do it without utility involvement, but it's much more sleek and streamlined and successful if you can get utility involvement. So we think this is a massively important breakthrough for multifamily, and we'd love to see it adopted in CNI as well. So yeah, thanks for asking.
I just want to add one thing to that, which is a lot of us are supporting the concept of tariffed on-bill financing, and I think that is a potential solution for what you're asking. There isn't a lot of, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of support. I think there was a recent pilot that is trying to get off the ground, but this concept basically provides a stable source of meter survivability type on-bill payment. That means someone can take on the loan, they pay it back off of the savings on their bill essentially. And if they move away, the debt stays with the meter. And that's one of the critical things. The on-bill programs that we have had do not have meter survivability, which makes it really hard for the people you're talking about to take on that liability. But if we make it so that when they move away, that debt stays with the meter and doesn't follow them, we believe that that's a major advancement in financing for this, particularly for equity low income, disadvantaged type customers.
I appreciate the solutions to the financing, and I know people talk about split incentives a lot. Really interesting, very important piece of the puzzle, but we cannot even get the solar and battery, even if we pay for it 100% free, no cost to the building owner, no cost to the tenant. We cannot get the benefits of the solar. We can't hook up solar and battery to tenants. It can only be hooked up right now to the main like building, and so it's totally messing up our ability to do this work. But anyways, but I appreciate all the split incentives, and the financing stuff is a really important piece for scaling, so I appreciate those comments. Thank you.
Thinking about legislation, at the end of the day, Senator Wiener has a balcony solar bill introduced that would allow people to just plug. It's called plug-in solar, balcony solar, and you offset locally, and that is something that you can do regardless of whether, you know, if you're a renter, you would just take it with you to where you live next. So we'll talk about legislation at the end of the day.
Thanks. Let's go to Commissioner McAllister in the middle there.
Well, thanks, Anthony. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Anthony. And all four of you, just impressive. It's already past my inspiration quotient that I came for. So thanks. And I'll make some comments at the end further on that. But I have a specific question. You know, Chris, and I think Richard, you brought up data access as a barrier. And that can mean a lot of different things. And obviously it depends on the business model and kind of the structural, you know, structure of each project. But I'm interested in kind of understanding more, particularly Chris, just what that means to you. You know, it's a perennial problem for the CCAs, even themselves, to kind of get the kind of, you know, up to even real-time access to data, to have that visibility. And, you know, we do have some levers to pull and I think we're making a lot of progress actually, even though you might not see it quite yet. But anyway, I want us to just kind of understand what that means, what specific sort of data access barriers you've encountered and what fixes you've kind of identified.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to say, we're hopeful that the CEC might look at this issue and get it into the IPER. This is, in my opinion, the starting point of a movement that we need to create to get this to change. Because if it's in the IPER, a lot of us can apply some pressure in some places to get some of these things to change. We can look at this issue from many different perspectives. If we just look at it from virtual power plants, if a virtual power plant operator is going to be participating in the markets, particularly if we're talking about spinning reserves, let alone frequency markets, these things are moving at practically light speed. The CCAs currently mostly are getting load data, metered load data, 2 to 3 days after the use. How do you optimize and drive a virtual power plant for market participation if you don't get the data for 2 or 3 days after the fact? That's a really significant barrier. Some of us believe those meters were essentially paid for by ratepayers. They are producing public good. The data is a public good. It should belong to all of the public power agencies. They should have access to their own data for use to optimize the things that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. We can apply this whole same logic to procurement, to settlement with the ISO. The day-to-day functions that CCAs are doing every day requires real-time data that they do not receive. That can be fixed. I can show you that this is costing California ratepayers billions of dollars today already. We can add that up. We can show you this is as big as the PCIA. In my opinion, this is one of the fundamental challenges that is going to slow or prevent CCAs from reaching their full promise. So if you want to understand more, this was coming up in a conversation with Loretta Lynch earlier. There's a few of us that are talking about coming together. I have a lot of information to put on the table to help hopefully get that into the IPER is what I would ask of the CEC. There's a whole lot more to this discussion than we can have in a 5-minute conversation. And I would like to lay that all out for you.
I want to just add a little bit to that piece because somebody asked me about the data policy and I mentioned that as an answer or as a recommendation. And this is how it shows up or it showed up in our project, right? So we worked to understand the businesses or the business models that would unlock the accessibility issue for low income households for DERs, right? And it all summed up to the fact that those developers, aggregators, and whatnot, who were willing to provide the assets, needed to have a reasonable and reasonable confidence of expecting some sort of great services value. And so, just to tag along on that, right? If that happens, what I can see unlocking based on years of discussion with several of the developers and people who are waiting for those great services values to pencil. It is possible then that at some point we can think about the low income households having a viable financial model where others can say, here's a battery, here's the solar, here's the improvements, enjoy the benefit, improve air quality, improve comfort on your home, and we're going to tap into these resources. That is not happening now because those companies who have been waiting for a long time on this promise of great services are not seeing those pencil yet, and it's all because of the data, right? In some ways, yeah.
I agree with your comments here, and I think we're all very much deeper into this than we can really talk about right now. But I would say it's not just the IPER. We've actually talked about this in the IPER in the past, and so I think the ideas are out there on records across various dockets at the commission, in particular in the load management standards docket. So I would really encourage you all to have a look at that because likely that docket will get reopened at some point. We'll do some tweaks, and we've gotten a lot of interesting comments about having a data exchange platform, not real-time data is different from like day after or morning after data. Use case is very different. So it deserves a lot of attention, but the authority pretty much is there. And so I think we're in a moment where we really should have a real nuts and bolts conversation about this.
I'm glad you brought it up. We are engaging with the LMS, as you may know. And personally, this is an issue that's squarely in the center of that. When we talk about load management standards and the idea of prices to devices, for example, which is embedded there, what does that mean for a CCA who gets their data 2 or 3 days after the fact? What it means is the CCAs are essentially forced to schedule most of their power in the day ahead. And you then come along on the day of and send a signal to the devices and you change the load patterns. What does that do to the CCA's bottom line? That actually is likely to increase costs for the CCAs that they will have to pass on to ratepayers. The LMS represents potential increases to ratepayer cost because of the data access issue, which we can fix. If we get CCAs the real-time data that they need to move into the real-time hours, not schedule everything the day before, if they can hold an open position and close that strategically using the real-time data that they need for that, then this LMS prices to devices thing won't be so threatening. The reality is prices to devices is going to hurt LSEs, it's going to hurt CCAs, it's going to put them underwater, and it's going to create additional ratepayer costs. But all of that comes down to the data access issues that I'm flagging. We can fix it. We can make the LMS work better, but right now it's likely to hurt CCAs.
And one of the issues that we confronted was the cost of a workaround for real-time metering. And, that beautiful house that Chris profiled and that Series Controls was managing through the MCE terms, that was, I don't know, $150 just in the rainforest metering. So effectively, we were looking at the cost of deploying really an entire separate smart meter infrastructure. There's interesting things that you can get in terms of sampling basis, but ultimately, for true control, you'd want to have, frankly, a new smart meter equivalent as, the SQMD, quality and all that type of stuff across the entire territory. That's insane. And I know that PG&E and some of the other IOUs are now talking about
for their own use, like gathering up the 15-minute data or whatever it is that they've got for the first time and doing much more sophisticated and granular things with that. And I saw a presentation on that not long ago, and I was like, oh my word, first of all, that they don't make use of their own smart meter data for their own purposes, for their own EDERMs or ADMS or whatever it is. But secondly, there's no mention whatsoever of passing that on to CCAs, right? So if from a regulatory perspective, we can get that smart meter data, then, all things become possible like Chris is describing. But right now, literally the only workaround is $150 per house, a duplicate structure. And that, it's fine for CNI maybe, but that is not going to scale for residential. So it may be multifamily, but not for individuals. So yeah, we'd love to see something that makes that opening possible. Thanks so much for bringing that up.
Yeah, we'll do one more.
Thanks, Claire Broom, 350 Bay Area. First of all, thanks so much for this discussion of the data access. I've participated in several series of data working groups, and this is central and not new. So I hope there's follow-up. My question, and maybe it can't be answered right away, but I'm really happy you mentioned during your discussion the difficulty sorting out what's the right mix of incentives to the property owner, the vendor doing the VPP or whatever, and the load serving entity. And so the one very attractive approach is certainly the open ADR DERMS as a solution to part of that. But it goes well beyond just the software costs. So I don't think there's a quick answer, but for those who are sort of struggling with transparency and the division of incentives, do you have other suggestions?
Let me just say that transparency into the contracts is helpful. I know that some of the CCAs, including MCE, have done some work to just basically find out what is going on a statewide basis with the contracts with the aggregators and the VPP vendors. And so, that's a beginning, but that's just at the highest level of like the software cost in and of itself. I think what we're talking about in terms of the value of the CCA owned and operated VPP is that, there's total public oversight. And as you know, city council people are the boards of the CCAs typically, and it's open book mostly. And folks can really look at how, who's getting what in terms of the ratepayer, the LSC, and any third-party project developers, vendors, device manufacturers, whoever. So we think that that's another reason why, at the apex of the pyramid of control and management, having a CCA there makes a huge difference, because they have reasons and requirements for open public data access that other folks don't have. So hopefully that can, as we see CCAs adopt these open platforms, that will shift the balance.
All right, I think we'll have to end it there. A lot of good discussions. I think we're moving into lunch next. So yeah, I encourage everyone to continue the discussion. But please join me in giving a round of applause to our panel here. Thank you so much.
Everybody, our afternoon session on affordability. I will turn it over to Ram from CEC.
Thank you, Kurt. I just have to say I've really enjoyed the morning session. It's a different audience than I'm normally in. So it's been really enjoyable just learning your experiences and what you have been going through. So today we have a great set of panelists talking about the challenge of affordability. I know affordability is a word that's been floating around a lot lately, especially in the last year. And I think there is different perspectives on how we address that. Ultimately, it's about making sure that consumers have access to low-cost energy and the services, more importantly, the services that energy provides. Oh, okay. Sorry. I guess, well, were you able to hear what I said before? If not, I'll just do one sentence recap. We're going to talk about affordability. We're going to talk about affordability. It has different facets. It's a hot topic of conversation. And I think everybody is going to provide us different ways of how we can address affordability through AECs. Very briefly about myself, Ram Narayanamurthy, I'm with the California Energy Commission. I lead the program, the existing buildings program, which is essentially the policy side of energy efficiency and buildings. And prior to that, I was at the DOE, where I worked with many of the people in the room with the Building Technologies Office. So as we jump into the conversation, I just wanted to kind of touch on one or two slides. I'm going to take moderator privilege and just talk a little bit about how we are approaching building decarbonization. So let's see, I'm trying to roll the slides. Oh, there is. Okay. One of the things I go back to is about a couple of years ago, we released a national blueprint for decarbonizing our building stock. And essentially, it is a combination of energy efficiency, demand flexibility, a focus on grid edge transformation, and life cycle emissions, embodied carbon. So, but within that, a core concept was around equity and affordability. And the reason I want to emphasize that is that as we look at where we are today with our electric rates and our gas costs, energy efficiency becomes a very important part of how we approach this transformation. How do we actually go back to the core around weatherization, around supporting people with having affordable energy, and how do we create safe, affordable, and comfortable homes and buildings? So going back to that concept, that leads us on the demand flexibility side, and I'll come back to energy efficiency at some point in the future, but I also wanted to just talk a little bit about where we are transforming. Traditionally, we have talked about flexibility as being a resource on the market side, on the bulk grid side. I think as we look forward, especially with electrification of buildings and transportation, the grid edge, where the distribution system meets the customer, that becomes a point of transformation. So this is something that I think you're going to be hearing from our panelists on their work around the grid edge and the different technologies on the grid edge. And looking at how we can reduce the impact at the grid edge, I think is going to be important, because more and more of our investments are happening on the distribution grid today. That's where our electric costs are going in. So working on optimizing the grid edge is going to be very important. And I just want to give a shout out to the Connected Communities work that was done at DOE. I think Floyd, I don't know where Floyd is. Floyd's one of the performers. And one of the reasons I wanted to raise that is that there was a whole host of different utility models as well as technologies that were explored for integration. And one example I'll lean back to that was actually very interesting was work with Rocky Mountain Power in Utah, where Rocky Mountain Power actually worked on integrating their ADMS, their distribution management system, with the customer DERMS. So how do you actually pull all of that together so that you can actually extract the full value of demand flexibility? There's work going on with Duke Power that TRC was working on, working with new home builders and being able to aggregate their resources. And we had the usual set of challenges, whether it's interconnections, community microgrids, et cetera. So a lot of really interesting lessons learned, but then now I'm flipping back to the work that was done through the CEC funding with the AECs. And I think there's some great stories. And Rich, I know you have some great perspective on how you guys approached it.
Yeah, just quickly review. I think folks are generally aware of this, but we're looking at almost 100% rate increases over the last 10 years. And unfortunately, that does not fall evenly. So really multifamily renters have been hit even harder, quite a bit harder. and it's led to a $2 billion shortfall, 2 million households in arrears in California. This is extremely painful for CCAs as well as IOUs and is not very sustainable. So the entire system has been very generous with folks in arrears and not paying and not shutting off meters. But I can tell you in the UK now, they have a system where it's prepay. And when your prepay is done, you're down. And that has caused a lot of, dislocation and distress. But a lot of people are literally going cold or going dark because they can't afford to carry that amount in arrears. And, we'll see how long California can. But this is literally the kind of thing that happens next. So we've got to get ahead of this. The electric bill's rising faster than wages and inflation, and electrification, which is wonderful, does increase exposure to electric rates versus gas rates. As we know, gas rates have been more stable, more affordable, sort of per BTU than electric. So if we want to continue to accelerate that transition, we got to get electric rates under control. And there's no easy one-off fixes. We're going to hear at least half a dozen ideas today. And if we don't have, at least that many in the solution hopper, we probably aren't going to get a handle on the problem. So integrated package. And, there's all kinds of reasons, and reasonable people can differ. And I don't know exactly the percentages, but we know wildfires have been insanely expensive, not only to prevent, and then, of course, also, SCE just got hit with maybe multi-billion-dollar of exposure from the Malibu and Palisades, whatever that was called. So they're going to, where else are they going to go? There really is no investor pocket. We're going to pay for that ultimately. And all the mitigation is super, super expensive. So unfortunately, the mitigation has been done within buy-in with the IOUs. I'm going to get to that as an issue. In terms of cost control, because maybe some other people should be involved in those mitigation efforts that maybe have a lower cost of doing business. All the T&D expansion for load growth, DERs and renewables, can have a shorter term increase in overall costs for all the reasons, but notably transformer replacement and things on the distribution side, as well as the assets themselves. But nonetheless, all of these things, and of course, a structural issue, which we hope we can get at. There's going to be a little more conversation today, which is the old issue of, can we have a DSO that's independent of the vertically integrated approach we have now, so that we don't have all of the built-in return on investment issues that are built into the regulated model that we have now, where cost doesn't matter. It's cost plus for the utilities, more the better, in terms of spending on infrastructure and hardening and all the rest. So, and investors have been prioritized over customers. I don't want to get too political, but, PG&E paid out a couple $2 billion in investor dividends in 1 year. That's a lot of money, folks. That's our money. So, what about that? We need a couple $2 billion to invest in a lot of things around the grid, and it'd be nice affordability might be one of them. So we'll see what happens with the new governor and new CPUC appointees, but let's not pretend that this isn't a crucial matter. Okay, so what kind of responses could be envisioned here? So in our view, the policy reform really has to look at this kind of core structural issue of financing and cost control. So if there's a regulated rate of return, and the more they spend, the more they make, that's structurally problematic, whatever mission you give the utility, whether it's wildfire mitigation, whether it's more renewables, whether it's, fancy grid hardening stuff of any kind. They're going to spend as much as they can and put it into the general rate case and call it good. So we got to get at structure, or we're really not playing the ball game. And then, where does the AEC agenda come in here? Well, we think it's absolutely critical because, as Ram alluded to, there is, EE is kind of like, it's always been incentive driven. We need to get EE into a different structural position so that we can contract for deeper retrofits. I mentioned the MEETS model and the on-bill payment and some of the technical issues around getting at deep EE with the customer's own money, as well as third-party money that's not incentive-driven. And we think the AECs have some ideas to contribute there. And, you know, from the political perspective, again, we'll see what is possible, but I think the by virtue of the existing structures, but we've seen now ballot initiatives take shape in various places, and state level policies take place in various states where we're getting some structural reform. Colorado's about to do some really interesting things with community VPPs, that their CPUC, the Colorado PUC, which has been very prosumer friendly, is going to show a lot of states how it can be done. And we hope to see that kind of approach here in California going forward. Maine has done some interesting things. Vermont with their efficiency utility. Ann Arbor said, we want to create a new kind of a utility model that's just focused on community level initiatives and still getting along well with their utility. So there's a lot of ways that if the legislature can't get it done or the CPUC can't get it done, we can put some pretty interesting things on the ballot that might be very, very attractive to the voters. And as we know, when PG&E got a ballot initiative to wipe out the CCAs a few years ago, they got taught a lesson about how spending sometimes doesn't actually help you that much. So even a 10-to-1 outspend, I think they were outspending the advocates, and they lost like 60-40, 65-35 on that. So just to give you a sense of the political vulnerability of the IOUs on something radical, it's there. And I think we sometimes underestimate that. And I know Rom couldn't say that because we're so he said this was a free speech zone, and if I wanted to say that, that was on me. This is my last slide. So yeah, I think you know, we talked a little bit about how do we get to public financing structures, and you know, the CCAs have, gosh, lots of money now. Some of them do, and in the sense that they can deploy their capital if they can get market rate returns, and they can deploy their capital against, you know, grid edge assets, which they're doing. Then that creates another source of financing that's a little different than just pumping out incentives. They can be investors. They can get, you know, again, 5-6% rate of return, and we hope that there's more opportunities for them to invest behind the meter and not only in their own. Not only in centralized approaches. So we think the behind the meter is competitive, cost competitive, and has other benefits. And notably, it bypasses the delivery charge. So if you can get on-site solar, on-site storage, flexibility, flexible smart appliances that are responding to a local signal within a building or within a neighborhood, and you're not sending power back onto the grid from the battery or the solar, and you're doing 100% self-consumption, guess what? You get about half the bill back as a delta, because 25 cents of the bill, if you've got a 50 cents kilowatt hour total charge, almost half of that is delivery charges now, maybe a little less than half. But that's a heck of a delta to be able to play with to finance behind the meter assets and still provide you know, discounts for the customer, property owner, and then a return back to the CCA. So long as you don't cross that blood-brain barrier of the meter, right, and you have a way for the CCA to invest behind the meter and have a contract that gets them the reductions and gets them a way to bill for the behind the meter load that's self-consumed, all of a sudden you're opening up this vastly improved profit margin, if you will. And that needs to be really considered as a paradigm shift for how we go forward with this, because that opens up deep energy retrofits and all the things we've tried but failed to do on efficiency for decades. So I think that's absolutely crucial. Thank you, Ellie. Whew. Anything? Yeah. Thank you. So I mentioned the meets, and you know, the other thing about CCAs is they have meter shutoff authority. They don't like to use it, and thankfully they don't use it much, but that's crucial when you're talking about energy efficiency. You know, when you put in a set of measures, they decay over time, and sometimes rather quickly. So you have to have a combination of a dynamic baseline meter that actually accounts for occupancy and weather and all that good stuff. And there are such technologies. One of them is made by a company called Energy RM, NREL certified for, you know, building models, and for you wonkies, IVMVP option C and D. So it's a software thing and it's an actual hardware device, and you go in and you say, okay, this is for real. This is metered. You can transact with this. You can settle on this amount of energy efficiency. It's dynamic, so all the things around occupancy and, like I said, weather and other factors are taken into account. So you know that the efficiency is persistent and it gave you that amount of efficiency on a monthly basis or whatever. Very, very crucial for getting transacting on efficiency in a way that's credible to an off-taker or a third party. The new VPP compensation approaches can capture, there's going to be a lot of conversation around distribution, deferred distribution. I think Alexandra mentioned that as something that is a very, very important issue for the CCAs as well as RA value, and trying to like enhance how we capture RA value with VPP. And Chris spoke to that earlier. There's more to be said about that. So we think the combination of the VPPs as a platform that CCAs deploy with some of these improvements in M&V and structure around cost recovery is going to be really a big deal. And last, and I touched on this in my last talk, but the market opportunity for turning AEC ideas and the so-called distributed capacity procurement into something that walks and talks and transacts like a regular solar PPA from the perspective of the LSC. That's a big deal because we want them to treat there's a terminology I really like. There's grid energy units, which is centralized, supply. There's distributed energy units, which is behind the meter on site. And then there's, shout out to Rob Harmon at MEETS, there's efficiency energy units, which is what you didn't use and what was caused by and trackable to a specific set of EEMs. And in our view, a bill can distinguish those and should, but you can procure them if you're an LSE. It's like, okay, the blended rate here is, it's all, 40 cents an hour, but you're actually making more money on the DEUs, the distributed energy units. You're making more money on the efficiency energy units because they have a higher margin and a higher value. So, but all are necessary and all are appropriate under different circumstances. You can't get to, efficiency energy units doesn't take 100% of the load. You still have to buy power or generate it on site from somewhere. So a bill that actually blends those three different types of units and gives the CCA a margin to earn on both the distributed energy unit that might be fully self-consumed and the efficiency energy unit that's a negawatt that was never produced but was saved. That is something that we think is a really important paradigm shift and can help drive affordability. So I think that's it. Yeah, it's a systemic problem. It's a structural problem. We need that governance reform vis-a-vis the distribution grid and the IOU role. We need the innovative rate design and the new business models to scale and optimize DERS, EE, and VPP. And we think CCAs have a lead role with the AEC context and working with a VPP as the kind of energy orchestrator. So, and we'll see if we can't get it done with all of that, then we go to the voters and we bring the meat, which is you've been screwed by the IOUs, your bills are too high, that's the headline. This fine print is whatever the fine print needs to be for structural reform, whether it's DSO or some other things to go with that. And we think that's winnable. So that's a package. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next, we have Laurel. She's with the Energy Coalition and very engaged in consumer engagement. So she's here to tell us stories about how she's been working with all the consumers.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Richard, for that. So let me jump to the next slide. There's an echo from this, so I have to stand away. So my name's Laurel, not to be confused with the room Laurel, which has confused me a lot, by the way. So that's an easy way to remember me. I'm with the Energy Coalition. You heard from Henaro earlier, who gave you the full overview of, I'll call it BASI. And I'm going to go a little deeper right now to give you the viewpoint of the customer and affordability. Something I really want to highlight is when this started 10 years ago, these AEC projects, affordability was not the word of the day. Okay. So if you probably noticed on some of those early slides, affordability wasn't mentioned as a goal of these projects. One thing I can say though, is with this project with BASI, we were working with low income households. So affordability was key in the work we did. So it actually folded in throughout the project without even stating it as an upfront goal. One thing I want to touch on here is this image. This is all the types of elements of the overall project. The ones that are highlighted are the ones that had an affordability lens, or that we're going to kind of go in deeper. So bear with me. I only have a couple minutes. The program elements are on the left. You'll see the macro affordability impact. My fellow panelists, my amazing fellow panelists will be kind of diving deeper into that macro effect of a lot of this effort. So I'm going to be speaking specifically about the customer impact, because that's what we were focused on. So starting with advanced homes, you heard about all the work that we did there. When you think about affordability, when you're working with single family, low income, we wanted to ensure that there are bill savings, right? And so we have demonstrated from this work, which included solar, storage, EE, weatherization, and education. Education is key. That we have a 35% measurable average reduction to these combined energy bills, combined gas and electricity. A few of these homes were fully electrified. Also, these homes received everything at no cost, which I think is important to mention, but you have to think about operationally how this goes over the life of the project, the life of this equipment. The other thing I want to mention, it came up, roofs. Over 50% of these homes had to have replaced roofs to make this viable, okay? The next one is community solar. Local solar generation, we heard about Hanaro speak about that earlier. The affordability benefit right off the bat, and many of these enrolled were renters, 20% discount on that bill. Affordability right day one. The next one is prosumer network. Mark, put your hand up back there. Okay, Mark Costa from our team is going to do a deeper dive on this later. We did a simulation of what it would look like if we actually created this concept of buying and selling with your neighbors. Simulated a 9% bill savings on your electricity bill. So right there, you can see the affordability impacts from the customer viewpoint on all this work we did with those homes. Very important. If you want to jump to the next slide. Oh, I got to jump to the next slide. Running my own slides here. Okay, we're going to talk about the transportation side of things. We did some work. We did EV chargers. We had some shared mobility. You heard from Hanaro pivoting a few times on what that would look like. We had electric vehicle chargers installed in what was previously EV desert, right? So there were no public accessible EV chargers. We installed those. We also installed them at certain homeowners as well. And what that created is this opportunity for folks that previously thought an EV was not going to be possible because there's just nowhere to charge. That creates the opportunity to consider ownership of an EV, which studies have shown long-term ownership of EV is actually more affordable for a household. So that creates that opportunity for these communities that previously thought it was unavailable to them. Also, the car sharing also gave that opportunity for those participants to experience what it was like to drive an EV. I think all of us, if you have driven an EV, raise your hand if you have driven an EV. And I think the whole room will go up. Most people I talk to that are in my normal community have not driven an EV. You try an EV and you are sold, I'd like to think. So I think that, again, opens that opportunity. So I'm going to just wrap it up by saying, I think when we talk about affordability in this discussion here, many of us are thinking, what is it on the system affordability? How do we reduce bills for everyone? But when you're working in these equity disadvantaged low-income communities, the focus is how you're impacting that particular customer. So that's what I just want to end with, and I'll pass it back to Ron. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Rich Brown. So Rich and I used to work together at LBL, and I think I want to give a shout out to Laszlo too. Rich, some very interesting findings for you.
Thank you, Ram. I'll stand here so that I'm on the Zoom for the recording, record this for posterity. Just to be quick, I'll be just focusing on the specific strategies that EcoBlock undertook and how those affect the household energy bills, essentially. That's kind of the affordability challenges. the rent's too high, the utility bill is too high for households. So just to remind you, Therese gave the overview this morning about EcoBlock. It's this package, integrated package of improvements applied to at the block level. Ultimately, it would be many blocks, but our pilot was a single block, including efficiency, electrification, rooftop solar, shared ownership rooftop solar, and shared EV curbside charging. So that's kind of the context here. So as Laurel mentioned, affordability was not one of the goals, or even it wasn't a word back then. Hasn't Donald Trump said that? What's this affordability? Anyway, so back in 2015, not an issue, but cost effectiveness always was, right? In energy efficiency, that's kind of the heritage here. You had to meet cost effectiveness tests, and these investments need to be cost effective. So that guided a lot of the way we designed it. And so, part of, looking at my bullet points here. So reducing capital costs is one of the key goals of the EcoBlock approach. This idea of doing economies of scale. You're treating multiple houses at the same time. You can do bulk procurement, those sort of labor savings. Also, at the same time, we didn't do so much of this in the pilot, but certainly for future implementations, we want to be trying to do low power electrification, where we're not causing upgrades to the panel or to the utility service, which then cascades upstream and causes distribution upgrades. So you really want to try and mitigate the impact on the grid from these electrification. Bill impacts. It's a reality in California that when you electrify, if you do nothing else, your bill is going to go up, the household utility bill. And that's a disaster for most of these moderate to low income families. So, by bundling the electrification with energy efficiency improvements, as well as the rooftop solar, that should offset those bill increases. We also added in this idea of shared ownership rooftop solar, because we think for low income people, it's easier to finance this as a group through an entity, an independent entity. And some households aren't able to install solar because of shading, roofs, other issues. And so by sharing the savings across the group of residents there, you can give everybody the benefit of solar, even if they all can't install it on the roof behind the meter. Another strategy is to help households improve the operation of these new assets. So for instance, being able to kind of deliver, educate the residents in bulk, together, and also by using peer-to-peer, you can walk across the street and talk to your neighbor about how they're using their heat pump, how did they set their thermostat, all those sorts of things. You can help improve the operation. Also making sure people are on the right rate plan after electrification, because in some cases, if you don't switch off of a dual fuel, the mixed fuel type standard rate plan to an all electric rate plan, your bill impact is going to be even worse. And finally, we included the shared EV as a way to try and reduce transportation costs. I think Therese mentioned we did an informal survey on our block, and almost 2/3 of the families said that they would be willing to get rid of a second vehicle, which is a significant cost for a family, if they had easy access to a shared EV. And so that can help, in terms of the whole household budget. Transportation is a big chunk of that. That can help affordability. We also explored micro-mobility, shared scooters and e-bikes. We didn't implement it here, but that's another potential way to reduce transportation costs. So that's our integrated approach, and I'll turn it over to Alexandra for the next. Do you want to? Yeah.
Thank you, Rich. Sorry to cut you out of that, Ron. Did you want to say something? No? Okay, great.
You have more interesting things to say than I do.
I doubt that, but I appreciate it. Feel free to interrupt. You're right, there's a little echo here. Apologies. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandra McGee, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at MCE. And while I'm sitting here at this table, I'm actually remembering a poem. It'll be brief, don't worry. But the late Joanna Macy lived in Berkeley, right up the road here, deep ecologist, philosopher, great thinker, and just recently passed away last year. Known for her translations of Rilke's poems, the first phrase of her most famous translation goes, "I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I will give myself to it." And we are in this room thinking about how do thermostats connect to the grid, connect to climate change. How are we going from a small device, a low-income home in a disadvantaged community, and pulling it together in these ever widening circles until we're addressing global climate change? And I think that's a beautiful mission to dedicate ourselves to, and I appreciate you all for being here this afternoon. Thanks. For you. Richard mentioned earlier today, when you think about the planning for the original phases of this grant, it actually began almost 11 years ago, if I did the math right, 11, 12. There were 2 CCAs 12 years ago. And I think Lancaster, you can tell me when your birthday is. I think it's October 2015. Ish. All right, so you were born right after the planning for this grant started. So this has been our 2 efforts. CCAs and AECs were born around the same time, and I think that we're linked in a very interesting way. And I'm very encouraged to know that there are many CCAs in the room. Redwood Coast Energy Authority, I saw you over there. NorCal, we got SoCal with Lancaster, we got MCE here. Can you raise your hand if you're a CCA person? All right, so find these people. The reason I mention is because while there were 2 of us when this planning for the grant started, there are now a couple dozen, and we serve about 200 towns, counties, cities across the state, representing about 15 million customers. And together have procured 21, I have it on my plate here, 21,000 megawatts of new renewable energy. So we were 2 when this planning grant started, but together we're becoming this groundswell. And I think CCAs can be really innovative partners to the technologists in the room, to local government entities and CBOs as well. I did want to start with, Ram, your question as like a intro to my presentation, which was how does weatherization fit into affordability? I do think that weatherization, we think about it, we've been thinking a lot about megawatts, but the best and cheapest electricity is actually the negawatts, not the megawatts you avoid, but the negawatts you create. So how are we dropping our customers' load to begin with? That's the most efficient path forward. Energy efficiency can be a vehicle. I know we're going to be talking about loading orders, but once you have the relationship with a customer, you're in that conversation, you're in their living room, maybe you're sitting down, you have a cup of tea. It's an easier place to start talking about electrification and solar and batteries and getting more into the flexible DERs that are necessary for virtual power plants. I'll just reference that for every $1 invested in energy efficiency, the grid and its consumers see about a $5 benefit from those investments. So EE really has to be at the beginning part of these conversations. I know it's not the sexy part. I know we're talking about flexibility, but let's not leave energy efficiency behind. MCE is one of the few agencies in California who are administering CPUC public purchase, no, PPPs. Public good. I'm pretty sure there's 3 P's. Public purpose programs. Thank you. Crowdsource that one. Thanks. We're one of the few who are doing PPP funded CPUC energy efficiency programs and have been running that for 12 years. And so with that serves a really great base when you're looking at CCAs being a program partner for your grid ideas and your load flexibility. That's 12 years of programs where there's a customer relationship, where there is trust built in the community. And there's also already installed equipment. Let's go back and make that equipment smart. Let's go back and make that equipment serve a bit more grid, create more grid services. Apologies, you can't hear the echo, but I can. Also, just one note in terms of the effectiveness of energy efficiency, it's about 1.5% on a customer's bill right now is us go into energy efficiency programs. If you look over the course of the last 10 years, that has really gone down by about 35% if you adjust for inflation. So it really is quite a cost-effective element. Okay, I'll get off my EE box. We'll talk about what y'all came here for, which was VPPs and flexibility. Up here on the screen are a couple different ways I wanted to talk about innovative financing for affordability. So you've heard a lot about CCAs. We can answer questions about that, but there's a flexibility in the financing for programs that CCAs can offer that weren't available 10 years ago, 11 years ago. That can be CPUC funded programs, but it also can be directly from the CCA's revenue. Just a couple examples. MCE runs an electric vehicle program. Over the course of this grant, we realized there's a real need for electrical panel upgrades, especially in homes with older building stock. And so CCAs can be a bit more flexible and nimble in creating funds to help the community reach our goals in that way. Electrification like heat pump water heaters as well. I haven't fixed the roof question, so if there's anyone here who can help me figure out how to get more roofs into our community, let me know. So the CCAs are an innovative financing tool right off the bat. I do want to invite you all to the engagement workshop afterwards. Jim Becker's looking at his phone right now, but he's got a great innovative financing idea. The social impact bond, along with Rosalind as co-CEO, are talking about how we can save money by using bonding structures. And that's a savings to the city. I'll give a brief. I'm going to give just the teaser so you know enough to come to that conversation, which is that the bond is used within this project, the Richmond project, to purchase and rehabilitate formerly blighted or abandoned homes. I think, Chris, you had the slide of the burnt shell of a home that was then reformed into a completely new all-electric home. How does that even happen? You need a lot of creativity at the table, where the home is actually purchased at auction and then renovated with local workforce, with all the bells and whistles, get very snazzy, and then sold at a discount to a low-income first-time home buyer. This is pairing load flexibility and grid solutions with the affordable housing crisis that we have in California. And it's a unique financing tool that I think has a lot of promise if other cities want to adopt it. So you should come to that conversation. That's the only teaser you're going to get. CCAs, 1, social impact bonds, 2. Number 3 is a revolving loan fund. Chris, you mentioned this briefly, but through this project, the AEC in Richmond, we created a revolving loan fund for battery storage. This is 0% interest for 10 years for low-income customers who want to include a battery for their home. If they're on medical baseline but not low income, it's a 2.5% interest for 5 years. And just a general customer, it's a 5% interest for 5 years. Now, you can't find those sorts of financing options otherwise. And so that's another innovative financing tool that I think will lend itself towards affordability. And lastly, and I think my time is up, though, I do believe no one's really going to flag me down, but the VPP tariff is also a way that we're looking to share the benefits of the grid back down to the customer. So we all know that this can be lucrative if we can reduce the load profile that we have to procure for. If a CCA had the data to be more accurate in that procurement, if we could reduce our resource adequacy costs by better aligning our load profile with the power that we have under procurement, that all creates savings. That can come to MC. How are we passing that back down to the customer who helped us meet that goal? And so through VPP Flex, which Sam is navigating for another CEC funded grant, thank you CEC, we're looking to adjust this VPP tariff to have a pay for performance element and be more dynamic to be able to capture more accurately the benefit that these DERs provide and share it back down to the technologists who helped us get there, the OEMs, the aggregators, and as well as the customer, without whom none of this would be possible. With that, I'll just mention, let's see. Those savings, by the way, I do want to just flag that those savings don't just belong to the participants of the VPP, but rather everyone who's served by the CCA. So it's a way that we benefit all involved. So with that, continue with your ever widening circles. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Alexandra. That was great. So the format we're going to have is, you are right, the echo is unnerving. And how to turn it off. That's okay. I'll keep going. So the format is going to be just a couple of questions for the panel from me. And then you are supposed to ask more questions, because otherwise I'm going to drone on with things that are of interest just to me, maybe not to you, right? So just to start off with, I think I just want to say you all made my day talking about energy efficiency. Thank you. Because it is something that I think it's fallen a little bit out of fashion. So it's really like important for us to just rethink and go back to why it's important before we layer on everything else. So thank you so much for that. So I'll start off with a question. I think for both Lauren and Alexandra, actually for all of you, right? With regards to customer engagement, what were the most difficult aspects of customer engagement with your AECs, with your individual AECs? What did customers feel like? What did you feel like customers could really relate to? And what were the aspects that they had a much harder time connecting to?
Can you hear me? Did that work? Okay. So great question. I will say we have an engagement panel this afternoon. Natalie, raise your hand. She'll be speaking at that one. So she'll go deeper in. I'll say what was interesting is when we started this project, it was kind of like this blanket approach of trying every way to reach out to the customer. And the thing is, when you're talking about giving things for free, this was mentioned earlier, like that's not going to sell it. You're going into people's homes and changing on appliances. And so, and people react to energy, like, identify with energy in different ways. So really offering a number of different items and really customizing to an individual consumer is important rather than a one size fits all. So I want to start there. But what had to happen is building trust in that community. And that takes time. I think a common theme for all of us with the AEC projects is everything takes time, including building trust in that community, working with those local trusted entities. We partnered with several CBOs, Hilda Solis's office, the local county supervisor, supported by sending mailers. We had the local CCA send mailers, things like that, where trusted names helped.
I'm remembering so many stamps.
Yeah.
on letters.
And that's at the end of the day what was effective. And so being out in the community for a while and having those trusted voices. Was that answering your question? So I think that I'll pause there.
Yeah. May I continue on that? So that's not a joke about the stamps. We did lick a lot of stamps for sending out letters, right? Like, how do you meet people where they are? Also, who has found a good translation for virtual power plant? Planta virtual de energía.
Kathy.
No, no, we're already trying to translate it into English. Let's try to translate it into other languages. I think that one of the struggles with reaching people in their homes, in their communities, is that there are, especially in a low-income neighborhood that we were working in Richmond, there's a lot of different languages, and some of the language we're using in English doesn't even quite land all the time. So I think that the translation element is significant. I will double down on that trust comment. I think one of the reasons that we were able to have a good number of participants in Richmond, we were targeting low-income solar customers. If we had just picked a community and looked at their low-income solar customer rate, we might have had very small numbers. However, MCE's been running a low-income solar program with Grid Alternatives in Richmond for about 8 years prior. So there was a lot of community engagement already. There was a lot of people who had benefited from previous investments already that we weren't starting from scratch. And that included the trust element. We weren't starting from scratch. I will also just mention one more thing, which is just that because of our focus on low income or fixed income customers in Richmond with solar, we had a bias that we inherited from the customers we were targeting, who tended to be retired on fixed incomes. And I think that the health challenges that they were facing made them more sensitive to that indoor air pollution narrative. And they were more interested in hearing about that, even if their bills were going to increase with some electrification, because their health concerns were significant. Also because they were retired, there was a lot more time and the phone calls were longer. So I think that's also something to consider. Come to the engagement panel to learn more.
Thank you. So Richard, just switching over, you talked a little bit about the DSO model, and I know that for a lot of people, that's a new terminology, maybe for many people. Do you want to just discuss a little bit about how we talked about the value for AECs being on the distribution system as we invest more in distribution? How do you envision that value being integrated into the distribution management systems that the IOUs have, or a different model by which you can actually get the value?
I'm actually going to call on two people. I hope they don't object, but Mark Costa at the Energy Coalition has authored a paper with some of his colleagues who are here in the room today on this issue. It was an ACEEE website lately, and I'd love him to just give a couple minutes of discussion about how that can work over here. And also Mark Lane has some experience now looking at the whole issue of integrating the VPP and the so-called automated demand side. What is it called? ADS. What's the ADMS?
Well,
yeah. So why don't we hear from Mark first, and then
appreciate. I'll just give
the other Mark Costa first.
Yeah, I'll give you the very high level and then pass it off as a pitch to come to the 2 o'clock. Whatever the prosumer network one.
We're just preempting your panel, Mark.
Yeah, so you should come to it. A lot of credit to Lorenzo Christophs and folks like that in the room that have really created the concept of the DSO model. But there's a couple things that we'll coin, and you can read it in our ACEEE summer study paper. It's called loading lanes. So that was one ingredient of this. Instead of sequentially going through weatherization, EE, you do it all at once. You try and reach as many people as possible. Another part is the creation of the notion that we're going beyond the time of the negawatt and we're going into the era of the make a watt. Right now that we have prosumers and the ability to create power, interact with these systems at the distribution level, we should do that. And then lastly, we need a market to transact these markets in. And a component across all those is some modernization and updates to our system planning and forecasting processes that really put equal footing and weight and cross-pollinate our load forecasts and our system and infrastructure planning. So that's the quick nutshell of that. It's called the Loading Lanes paper in the ACEEE 2024 summer study.
And Mark, can you just, since Lorenzo is in the room, Lorenzo's written multiple papers on the DSO structure opportunity. If you could just summarize some of the, 5 minutes, I don't know what you got here.
No pressure.
You're up.
Lorenzo really deserves an entire afternoon on this subject, so apologies.
Thanks. I've been having a couple of conversations with folks about that idea today, and yeah, sure. So I worked at the Energy Commission actually during the late 90s when California was going through its electric restructuring. And so I represented the CEC with a couple of other folks in different retail side proceedings like access to data and who's going to do data management when you create retail direct access and so on. So I was at that. And then in 99, I went to the ISO, which was 1 year before the whole thing blew up. So I could, well, exactly. I could say it wasn't my fault because I didn't design the thing. I was working at the CEC at the time. And I stayed at the ISO for about 19 years doing wholesale market design. We reformed the transmission planning process, the generator interconnection process, and a whole lot of policy stuff. But around 2013, I suddenly realized that distributed resources were going to change everything. We had a few small scale that were coming in under this remat program that the CPUC started, and small scale 1, 2, 3 megawatt size wanted to participate in the ISO market. And so we created provisions to accommodate them. And I thought, okay, ISO can incorporate 20 or 30 of these things. What if we have 20,000 of them? What if we have 30,000 of them? And it made me start thinking that massive growth of distributed resources changes everything. It changes the business models, the operation models, how we do planning, et cetera. So that became kind of a personal interest for me, because I saw in distributed resources really decentralization and democratization of power. Not only are the technologies distributed, but you can distribute the ownership. So at the local level, people, communities, community groups, et cetera, could own assets that generate revenues, bring revenues into the community, and enrich local economies. So I left ISO 8 years ago and have been working on those kinds of things. Now, on the DSO question, yeah, I did. I actually, the first time I mentioned that in public was at the CEC. It was an IPER hearing in the summer of 2013. And I remember mentioning the idea that, with DERs, with distributed resource, I don't think we used DER then, but with distributed resources coming on the grid, we're going to need to change how the utility functions. We need to create something called a distribution system operator. And the room kind of went silent, and a bunch of eyebrows went up, and it's like, who let him in? It was kind of weird, but I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Anyway, the thing I would add, though, just sort of to cap off all of the things that I've heard today about roadblocks, my thought to share as sort of a seed is we need an open access framework for distribution comparable to what FERC created in the 90s. In the 1990s, they realized that generation could be a competitive enterprise. You can have wholesale suppliers, wholesale buyers who are the distribution utilities or the load serving entities, but they need to be able to move the power over a network under non-discriminatory rates, terms, and conditions, an open access framework. And FERC, in its regulations, Order 888 and 889, created this open access transmission requirement. What I think I'd like to see now is, can we create something like that on distribution? If you're a distribution owning utility, you have to operate under an open access regulatory framework that would allow all the kinds of things we're talking about. Or Code Section 218 is just a little subset of that. But the bigger picture is, let's create an open access regulatory framework. This is something that the state could do. This would be something that could happen in state legislation and regulation. So thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Thanks.
Can I get an amen?
Mark, 1 minute if you can.
Okay, I'll be
Yes.
quick. I just want to make sure I'm on camera
Yeah.
here. Okay. So when we first looked at the enterprise DERMS and really what it meant, something completely different, a different approach for a CCA, building a purpose-built piece of software that the key was, it was enterprise. That meant that it ran inside the organization. It had access to a lot of information, a lot of things that a system outside would not be able to see. And part of that's also including not just the DERS control, but bringing that information together and serving it up to somebody else to see. And one of the things that we really focused on was a lot of that integration to CAISO to make sure we're getting a lot of information from the CAISO on values, nodal pricing, things like that. We also integrated with some other third-party software that we could get information from them and about grid constraints, congestion, and really build a piece of software that just isn't focused on one task of just being a DERMS. It's really a piece of a bigger puzzle. It's a piece of software that's integrated holistically into all the back office systems and then reaching out and able to pass information to other systems like DSOs. Even with PG&E, there's certain requirements to stream data to them. And so we're building out those hooks and all that so that they can get real-time information, telemetry from our system, on what the grid conditions are down to even a nodal level and pass that information upstream. And so anyway, it's again, when you look at an enterprise piece of software, this is a little different than, contracting with a vendor. This is an integrated piece of your buying, your procurement, your DSO, and really how you're managing your whole procurement and energy usage.
Thank you. I like this panel. We're taking like hard left turns back and forth. So I'll have one more question and then we can throw it out to the audience. But yeah, I would love to geek out on the DSOs and the ADMS integration separately. So so Alexander, like you, as you said, you're the one of the 5 entities who's actually in the PUC's program landscape. There's been a lot of ideas that came up today, right? How do you think that we can actually go back and reinvigorate the PUC programmatic landscape? And ultimately, how do we feel like we can improve the quality of life, especially for low-income residents? I think that's one of the areas that we keep going back to within that landscape that we have today. Sorry. Okay. I guess I wasn't holding my mic close enough. So my question was about the CPUC-E programs and the program landscape, and taking the ideas that we have heard about today and seeing how we can incorporate that back so that we can reinvigorate the PUC programs.
Anybody from the CPC in the room? How in trouble am I going to be? No. Okay. I'm happy to share the hot mic with you. There's a couple things that come to mind. One, I think would have buy-in, the other medium buy-in, and I'll hand it to you for the easy buy-in. But I do think that currently the way that workforce programs are assessed at the CPUC come under the same cost effectiveness judgments or metrics as energy efficiency. And I do think that puts us at a disadvantage for creating the green workforce necessary for this green transition. Energy efficiency is an enormous workforce opportunity for California. There's 312,000 workers in the energy efficiency space. That's by far one of the largest segments in energy. However, the workforce programs that are funded through CPUC dollars are tied to these cost effectiveness. How do you quantify the cost effectiveness of giving a family a new job opportunity? I don't think so. I think maybe a reassessment of how the cost effectiveness metric applies to workforce, especially on energy efficiency programs, is an element. Here's the part that I get nervous about saying, but I know we have a lot of complexity around the power charge indifference adjustment. It is what we commonly refer to as the exit fee charged to CCA customers for departing service. Some of our customers departed service 15 years ago. And so those contracts, I would expect some of them to start expiring. And yet the PCIA is still a significant portion on many CCA customers' bills. And so I think someone mentioned there's a lot of like flexibility or window of opportunity to work with the funds that CCAs can access, but CCAs still do need to adjust rates based on the changing nature of the PCIA, which many of you will know had quite a big swing this year. So I would say those are two elements outside the EE range, really. That's probably what you're getting at, but those are the two that come to mind.
Thank you.
I think we're out of time, but I'll just add, double down, just workforce education training programs have a cost effectiveness rating with TRC. Raise your hand if you know what TRC is. Okay. Of 0. Okay. So according, if you can only fund cost effective programs, you'd have 0 WEP programs in the state. Someone's raising their hand, so I don't know what that means. Maybe there's one with a small cost effectiveness. Yeah, but so that's just there. So cost effectiveness reform, really thinking about how to evaluate value of programs, and simplification. So we have built an overcomplicated system over many years, but I have a lot more to say. I'm sure a few of us do. So maybe over drinks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I think we'll have to wrap up. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your input and expertise. And if there are more questions, you know where they are.
We did a lot today. What's important that I learned? Make sure somebody reads a poem somewhere during the conference. So that was really, anyway, so we're at the wrap-up session. My head's kind of exploding, as hopefully all of yours is as well. Just a program note, all these materials are going to be sent to you afterwards. There's a ginormous slide deck you all receive along with a link to the Zoom recording. This will all be up on our website as well, where you register for the event. You'll get a sort of a ping saying everything's posted to the website. And without further ado, let's kick this off. So it's going to be a quick panel, some conversation. There's going to be some polling. We'll see what people, this is the most expert crowd I've ever seen. We had an amazing breakout on microgrids, and virtually every person in the room was an expert. It was like, oh my gosh, why are we only have 4 people sitting here? We should everybody. So I'm excited for the final panel, and I think we're going to wrap with Commissioner McAllister as well. So, and then we're going to go to the bar, which is like a block from here. So take it away.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know if Allie's in the room, but she will be joining shortly. And we're going to shorten everybody, practically, especially myself, to make room for a real out of the park home run that I think she can hit on microgrids, which is so fundamental to what we want to do here with our AECs. So we're excited to do that. So I'm going to ask your indulgence while I both go faster and skip some things. But you know, we have a lot of challenges we can solve with AECs, and we've talked about that. And we're going to talk, and we're going to just summarize what I think, from our perspective at Xenia Alliance, are the most salient, impactful things that we can do to move this whole agenda forward across the affordability, resiliency, carb, and equity lenses. So, on affordability, you know, we've had a strategy that's about integration. It's about VPP deployment. It's about getting value out of the BTM assets in combination with the grid value. So what are the actions to do that? Well, we talked about an open ADR DERMS, and that's going to be moving forward. And we have a whole territory strategy and action set with MCE, soon with Lancaster as well. And we have a mechanism to bring that solution set to other CCAs, and that's effectively ongoing. Innovative tariffs come with that, aligning the CCA and other incentives to ensure that DER assets can be integrated into VPPs without DER vendor and aggregator business model conflict. That's a set of basically kind of soft knowledge and some contractual templates and program design concepts that we're going to be summarizing in our AEC white paper and toolkit that y'all will have access to next month, knock on wood. And lastly, addressing CNI market barriers with innovative models that address the split incentive. I touched on those already, but go to the meetscoalition.org website and read this like 6-page white paper. It just blew my mind, and it's a wonderful model and particularly well suited to CNI and to multifamily. On the resilience and decarb side, you know, holistic approach we've talked about that brings EE back up to the loading lane. It's part of the loading lanes, but, you know, we've had people, Joe Rommel just mentioned as an example, just said, hey, solar and storage is all we need to do now. It's so cheap. It's too cheap to meter kind of thing. No, EE is even cheaper. We still need to do EE. We just need to put it into the package that makes it easy to finance as a solar PPA and as easy to transact as a, quote, supply side resource, efficiency energy unit, if you will, for CCAs and other off-takers and LSEs. Smarter orchestration is a given with a good VPP platform, and the CCA DSO interface. We should be so lucky as to have a DSO, right? So, to Lorenzo's remarks and folks, Mark Costa and others that have advanced the DSO policy framework, this is a great time to kind of like refresh that, build a coalition around that, and actually bring that to the attention of our gubernatorial candidates and the future CPUC new commission members. So the action items from a like open market perspective would be for folks to actually get a hold of the grid analytics, and folks like Kavala and others have wonderful platforms to do that. It was great to hear about the UCLA Energy Atlas, which I wasn't as aware of as I should be. So there's a lot of publicly available open source stuff, and then adding that on and integrating that with building level analytics. Another shout out, I don't mind, Helios Exchange. It's an incredible platform that's available and has all the buildings in California from assessor data and Google Street View data, and you can literally automatically photographs of the building, automatically generates a pro forma for EE and DERS. You just click through which ones you want, which ones are most effective, and it pops out a pro forma. It's like, oh my word. So we're bringing that to some CCAs, and that's a fantastic resource. Also, automating the proposal generation. We spent a lot of time on that. It's very much of a hassle. Some folks, you know, Base Power in Texas is coming national. They have a scheme for that. Lots of companies claim to have it. I don't know which is vaporware and which is real, but Treehouse is another national implementer on behind the meter stuff. I've got 1 minute. And, more power to the folks that solve that problem. But we would love to see that as part of the vertical stack that we either build or buy together. And then contract or build vertically integrated capabilities to do all of this. So that includes the aggregation approach that is grid facing and customer facing. It's the finance, it's the O&M, it's the installs, it's all of it. So we think we can do that in some CCAs for sure, and others, market actors need to, take advantage. On the equity side, I'll just mention that equity is not just fairness, it's asset ownership. V2G bidirectional will give us a chance for asset ownership if those vehicles are affordable. We call upon down here targeted incentives, the last bullet, for lower cost V2G EVs, a fee-based approach that loads more incentive into lower cost vehicles to make them yet further lower cost, taxes higher cost vehicles to do that. Frankly, whether they're ICE or EV, if somebody can afford an $80,000 to $150,000 car, how about an extra grand so that a V2G Leaf is 16 grand instead of 24 grand, right? That could be done. That's a policy decision. That doesn't cost anybody but rich folks some money. That's a trickle down and not a trickle up. We've had trickle up with the way cap and trade has been administered. It's not progressive, it's regressive. This would be highly progressive. So fee bait, policy wonks, listen, we should bring that. And then deploy large pools of low-cost capital. Bonding, we've talked about social impact bonds, we've talked about utilities having access to their own capital if they can get the money back, and cities as well. I'm going to stop. Commercial V2G ecosystem development, he's doing that, it's all his fault, and we're going to make that happen, and I'm done. If you're interested in accelerating AECs, please talk to me, Kurt, Ellie, basically anybody up on this panel, and we're gonna work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so I didn't give a little bit of intro context. Obviously, policy is the name of the game. That's what we do at the Climate Center. We're going to have a new governor. I mean, depending on how it shakes out in the primary, it might be clear by June. One of our candidates has been very clear about his goals in this area, and so that will have a potentially big impact. So that's context. We at the Climate Center worked with partners at Advanced Energy United and Environment California, Caleb in the back, and others on a bunch of VPP bills last year, AB 740, SB 541, AB 44. These were all, we thought, very simple, non-controversial bills that passed with virtually no opposition in the legislature. They were all vetoed by the governor, unfortunately. And so this year's legislative deadline is tomorrow, kind of a big week. In terms of what's happening, there will be a suite of new bills that are going to be on the table in Sacramento this year. Some of those are being advocated by members of what we call the Grid for the Future Coalition. We meet monthly and we just share information about who's working on what bills, what are the strategies, how can we work together. Some of the things on the hopper already, I talked earlier about Senator Wiener's got a balcony solar bill. It'd be interesting. We're working again with Advanced Energy United and Environment California on some more VPP related bills. There's going to be a resource adequacy bill. One of the critical pieces is, to what extent is there something that can be monetized? Can we put behind the meter storage on a level playing field with, utility scale power plants as a grid asset that should qualify for resource adequacy? So the resource adequacy bill by Senator Becker will do that, trying to get us on a level playing field with gas peaker plants, typically located in low-income communities. We're working with Senator Becker on another VGI bill that will be introduced tomorrow. I think, I guess it's whatever. Anyway, I'm not trying to make news here. I think I'm good. There's going to be a grid utilization bill, which is seeking to mimic some work that's been happening elsewhere. So Virginia passed a bill along these regards. Like, okay, so if we currently only use about 60% of the capacity in the existing wires, why don't we make it a priority to use a higher percentage of that capacity before we go spend billions of dollars in new unneeded utility infrastructure investments in poles and wires when we don't need to? We can actually, do load shifting on the distribution grid, and it's basically use demand flexibility to accommodate the problem they got. So this is some of the things that are on the docket this year in Sacramento. How it plays out, we don't know. The deadline, like I said, is tomorrow. Hopefully there'll be some press talking about, okay, what are all the bills that are on the table? But My apologies. Anyway, so speaking of good ideas, I want to hand it over to Allie. We had a session, and there's a couple of people who are really passionate and have good ideas about what to do next. So we just made a field decision 3 minutes ago to add Allie. We brought up her. Allie, you want to introduce yourself, and I'll bring up your slide.
Hi. I'm just winging it, so thank you for bearing with me here. Allie DiTrio, I'm the Chief Strategist for Reimagine Power and the Senior Advisor for the Microgrid Resources Coalition. Been advocating for microgrids and distributed energy resources, policy, market strategy, business development, and like kind of the intersection of all that for a long time. So I've was brought in the AEC crowd for our first iteration of this white paper, kind of taking the collection of all of the AEC project experiences and kind of really discerning down the lessons learned, the trials, the tribulations. My other slide had, a nice funny poem about all the blood, sweat, and tears that have been poured into these projects and where we're at today. So I want to really emphasize that, from these experiences, we really want to put in some of these recommendations into policy action, both this year, as Kurt said, and future years. We will have a new governor in the future. I think there is a lot of opportunity this legislative session, though, to do some really impactful things. And there's also a lot of things happening in other states, like Oregon just passed this past summer. Some really incredible microgrid legislation, I think, is really strong, really focuses on community scale resources, community ownership, and the process by which, local governments and communities can build these types of resources, as well as, again, I always say the monetization pathways by which we can build these resources and have them actually get financed. So we don't need a whole bunch of grants and subsidies that are subject to the fits and whims of the legislature and funding from, any different source. We can really have ways for monetizing the resources for their blue sky benefits, as well as for their black sky benefits, providing resilience and backup power when needed. And so I'm just going to quickly run through the policy recommendations for everybody's benefit. And so we went through the first iteration with, again, a lot of the trials and tribulations of like EcoBlock, Lancaster, Bassett Avocado Heights, Berkeley, the whole span of them have all been subject to a number of challenges. I think one of the first and foremost ones is changing what we call the over the fence rule, or Public Utilities Code Section 218, which basically says that if you're going to distribute power across more than two properties or across a street for compensation, importantly, that you're considered a public utility subject to Public Utilities Commission oversight. And so we really want to have some way of changing that law to exempt microgrids that are owned and controlled by communities, and have a process by which they can actually build microgrids that provide, again, these blue sky benefits and black sky benefits. So our thought process from the first iteration moving to the second is create kind of a designation in statute called like a community microgrid operator. It could be called another name, but really develop an accompanying regulatory framework. And Oregon's legislation, I think, really gets at this, where they're looking at creating microgrid zones by which like local governments can approve these like areas where communities can then go ahead and build microgrids that can serve multiple customers and be configured in any number of different ways. And so we want to look at having a process by which we can do that, so that we allow them to have master metering and sub-metering technology and local distribution infrastructure. Again, the local ownership piece, I think, is really crucial for our energy democratization goals as well. And so having that be permissible clearly in statute is something that we'd like to have, or address some of the regulatory issues that underpin some of those rules, as well as an option to formally buy out and use utility distribution infrastructure. Again, so you could reconfigure it and have the customers and communities be able to own and control that infrastructure. Again, optimize the resources both for the included customers as well as for the benefit of the grid and the system as a whole, to drive down costs. We can make better use of our existing grid infrastructure. And so with that, developing tariffs and rates that really allow for that electron sharing locally, as well as compensation for the grid services, load flexibility to support the broader system needs we have. And this will really maximize cost savings for all ratepayers, and through that streamline the interconnection process. And the last thing I'll say is just one of the very systemic issues I think that we face, and a lot of us understand that, is that we really need to look at a utility business model for the 21st century. Our 20th century business model for the utilities is based on when we first were trying to get electricity to the masses. We wanted to build out the grid. We needed a couple entities that had capital to do that, and they would get their guaranteed rate of return for building out that infrastructure and getting electricity to the masses. Guess what? We did that cheap and reliably. Check mark. Congratulations, utilities. Thank you so much. We are in the 21st century now, and we have a lot of new policy needs and a lot of like changing needs and goals, like getting more clean energy, like looking at decarbonization. We have a lot of issues with wildfires and extreme weather. We have resiliency challenges, and we really do need to think about equity and disadvantaged communities, and a lot of those that have been traditionally harmed in the original build out of our our power system. And we need to look at having a more equitable system. And so if we're going to, how different would the world look if we had, instead of the utilities getting a 12% interest rate or 12% rate of return on transmission distribution build out, instead they got that rate of return for how many projects they interconnected on a local level? How different would our world look? Crazy. So this is like all these things underpin a systemic like energy policy change where we do, I think Lorenzo's written a lot of great work on this, a lot of other people in this room and elsewhere. We need to look at having a distribution system operator model that is an open access and allow us to have and regulate based on, not based on cost of service, but on performance-based regulation where the utilities make their money based on how good of a job they do, just like every other business, just like all of us have to do in our jobs. And if we have that kind of systemic policy change, I think that then kind of rights the ship in terms of aligning the incentives and motives of all of the different market actors so we can actually all achieve the goals I think we all want to see. So, and then that kind of comes back to really empowering customers and communities to build microgrids, allowing us to have more virtual power plants, and by doing that faster, cheaper, easier, smoother. And so we can have like many more eco blocks and Lancasters and stuff without all of the challenges and blood, sweat, and tears associated with that. And with that,
okay, unfortunately, Hanaro and Therese, you have to follow Allie. I don't know. Like,
Okay. I'm going to stand up because otherwise you can't see me. So I have 5 points. One, I just want to say thank you to all of you for coming. I have learned so much from the questions and the comments and the stories that you provided. So I just want to say thank you. Two, thanks to, I want to say thanks to CEC. I don't know where Michael is, my cam. But anyway, I suggested to him like 4 years ago, I think we should get all 4 of the AEC projects together. And so we can talk about stuff. And they did. And we met, I don't know, 6, 8 times or something. We had the finance team, we had different, and that was amazing. Like once we've stopped competing as research projects, let's work together. And that's been wonderful. So thank you for that, Michael. And thank you for Z&E for inviting us to be part of this. I think it's been fantastic. So I think then my other two couple points here is one, in terms of zonal decarbonization or microgrids, whatever, having a multidisciplinary team was really key. I had many meetings where I had the energy regulatory lawyer telling something to the solar contractor, saying something to the electrical engineer, and they were all different things. They were all things that not every one person knew about, right? So it's really critical as we start to forge these new directions to have these multidisciplinary teams get people together to talk about these things. And then number 4 is decarbonization is a journey. And I think as we do zonal decarbonization, you got to work with your community. Some of them might want to, like the Pacific Palisades, they might want to go for that microgrid, and other people just want a tree to shade their car, and then eventually you'll get them to buy an induction stove with their neighbors or something, do bulk purchase. So just to remember that sometimes it'll take you 2 years to do this, it might take 10. And then finally, I think as we've been working through the day and preparing for this, one of my questions to you all is, how do we share these lessons learned? I feel like in EcoBlock, we've developed an incredible brain trust of, we have opinions about how this could be done better the next time. And I don't know how to share that. So if you have thoughts about this, whether it's case studies, whether it's meetings like this or what have you, we are all ears. So thank you.
so we, at the Climate Center, we have something called the California Climate Policy Summit, which is taking place on April 13th in Sacramento. You are all invited. Go to our website, www.theclimatecenter.org, and you can register for the Policy Summit. And we're going to have a track talking about these issues. So learn more online. No.
Okay, so first and foremost, yes, so thank you to the CEC, to Michael, our CAM, and to Anthony and everyone who made this possible, including Richard and everybody else. We appreciate the venue, the opportunity to come together and learn from each other. I am humbled by the level of expertise, the experience, and the commitment and mission that we all have, here in this room. And I I want to emphasize that, there's a huge segment of the population who don't yet have access to these things. And yes, we need the VPPs and the challenges. And so yes to all of that. And there is a lot of work to do in getting access, giving everyone access, right? Especially those that are the low income, and the policies will change. I have confidence and trust on all of this in this team, but also we're working on, there continues to be communities that come to us and say, like, how do we do this, right? We want community resilience, and they don't know what that means. From a policy perspective, they just know that they need reliable power, they need lower bills, and so we're meeting with them on an ongoing basis. There's also, last year there was a lot of emphasis on getting funds out from the federal GGRF. We know that didn't work. But a lot of momentum on CDFIs and other financial institutions to deploy climate capital is still there, and they're still interested. And so we're meeting with them and trying to help them understand that how long it takes and how hard it is. But we want to be at the table, with that. And so there's this sort of interconnection of lots of these different people that we're having these conversations. And so my takeaway is I am encouraged. I'm feeling positive, and looking forward to the collaboration that I think will happen out of this room.
So now comes your time to say something. Chris, take it away.
Well, I just want to one up Hanaro and say that today was really an inspiration to me to see all of you here engaging with these concepts that we all worked so hard on for 10 years. It's been a long journey. We've been through a lot together. I want you to think about us here in the room today as an advanced energy community. We all together have the potential to implement many of the things that we presented here today. If we work together, some of these changes can scale and really have the impact that we all envisioned. So I'm asking all of you to work with us, to follow up after today with the people that you saw speaking. Ask for some time. Let's put together a movement that takes the AEC concept to the next level. All I want.
And Chris, do you want to introduce this segment, how this is going to work?
Oh yeah, so we're going to do some polling questions. This is going to be the standard thing. You've seen this before. If you've got a phone or a tablet, you can take a picture of the QR code, or you can enter the web link that's kind of hard to read in the upper right-hand corner, upper left-hand
I think
corner.
if you scan the QR code with your phone, it'll take you to a link, and that should get you to a poll.
And then you're going to respond as we go. The results will tabulate automatically. You'll have some time to enter your responses.
Oh, is that reflective of real-time responses happening? Huh. Should I be a little clock?
Assigning specific karaoke assignments. You're in the winning group. You're on first.
Bop, 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 bop. Anyone? How much more time do people?
You can download the data later then.
Okay.
How many people want to respond that haven't responded yet? Probably enough time. Okay. Do you want to talk about the results?
Well, it's interesting. It looks like virtual power plants. Maybe that's not a surprise. That does seem to be a hot topic of the day. But I find it interesting that community engagement and education is coming in a close second there, which is encouraging. And you heard today about the importance and the difficulty, the complexity, and all the barriers involved in just getting people to understand what these things are, let alone make a decision to move forward. And so that is absolutely critical. So I'm glad to see that ranking so high.
So hope all your organizations will support SB 913. Next question. Would you support amending California PC Code 218? Okay. All right. Yeah, well. Not certain. Oh, okay. So these poll questions were written before we yanked Ali up here. So, okay. I don't think we need further conversation on this polling question. Okay, which strategy for accelerating the deployment of beneficial community-scale microgrids will be most effective? Well, we will have a new governor, guaranteed. Yeah, depending on the new governor, there may not need to be a ballot measure. Maybe there will be. Develop a robust interconnection tariff. Yeah. So all the scars, a lot of us spent a lot of time on implementation of SB 1339 and huge amounts of time and comments to the PUC. And
I do want to point out, I had talked to Ali about this last night, and just to let people here who might feel defeatist about this idea of changing the over the fence rules, to remind them that they have been changed before. I don't know if Lorenzo remembers, we got an exemption for cogen, and I believe there was a second exemption for electric vehicle charging stations, which they wanted to say any charging station that serves more than 2 community members is going to be electrical corporation. This is crazy. The same thing is true with community microgrids. The benefits are too high. This rule should not stand in the way. We can get a targeted exemption for microgrids. That's all we're saying. A common sense exemption to these rules, not a wholesale elimination of the over the fence rules. We can maintain safety and all the things that 218 were meant to protect if we do something like the CMO that we talked about earlier. And so we want you all to think about that and support that, and maybe help us with the legislative intervention on 218.
And it looks like the interconnection tariff is the winner. Yeah, obviously, show me the money. Everything is going to be predicated on whether there's a price signal that incentivizes all these things. Again, so support SB 913 to sort of solidify the compensation that can be provided, and hopefully that moves the needle on that issue. Which AEF funding financing strategies do you believe can be scaled cost effectively to ensure equitable and affordable access to beneficial clean energy technology? Select up to 3. Collect each selection up to 3 times the increased priority. Money. Okay, what do we got? We got tariffed on-bill financing. Chris, you want to provide any commentary on that one?
I'm getting myself in trouble here. Well, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise, but it's encouraging to me, and I think probably to many of us, that tariffed on-bill financing is top in the list. A lot of us believe that that's just a no-brainer. It needs to happen. It's going to help with almost every issue that we're talking about here today, from decarb to equity and cost savings, affordability. It's really the whole thing. And other states have gotten it done, as was mentioned before. So why California's lagging on this, it's hard to fathom. So help us go to the mat for tariffed on-bill financing, people. All of the things on this list can really help. I got to say, it's great that everything's getting some votes, but let's get the tariffed on-bill financing thing done.
Very useful data. Okay, before we do the thank yous, I think we're going to have a couple of remarks from Commissioner McAllister to wrap us up. And then we'll have a couple minutes for Q&A, and then we'll wrap at 4:30 to go to the local bar. So
thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Hard act to follow there. And I'm the state. So, I'll pull the arrows out later. But really but I'm not the PUC. Okay. So, yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. But just thanks to the team, Eric and Anthony, I don't see them right now, and just, organizers all for, Kurt, thank you. And just all the presentations this morning. I was not able to do any of the sessions, but I'm sure they were awesome. So, this has been really inspirational. I kind of came largely to get inspired myself and just sort of, hear from all of you directly instead of getting briefed on it later. And that was just, it was the right choice. I mean, it sort of reminded me and somewhat reminded me of my Peace Corps days, actually. Working with communities is hard. It's transactionally intensive, right? It requires a lot of shoe leather. It requires relationships. It requires, really building a consensus. And ultimately there's got to be demand pull for a lot of this stuff, right? So people have to want it. We're not going to force it on people, right? They have to want it. And so we have an affordability issue, that makes the electrification value proposition a little challenging in much of the state. So we need to focus on those pockets that we're going to show success. And we're trying to do that with the Equitable Building Decarbonization Program. That's a multi-year effort as well. But learning from 10 years of all of what you all have done is really amazing. It kind of, reminds me of my favorite band, Soda Stereo. They're Argentinian, and they have a saying called Pueblo Chico, Infierno Grande. And it's kind of a saying throughout Latin America, actually, but that means small town, big hell. Okay, so it's a little overstated, but still, it's like working with your neighbors, building those coalitions with people that you don't agree with about everything, particularly these days in the U.S. We have to look past that and really build consensus where we can. And so I think that's fundamental to success. We often think of this as like kind of an equipment, equipment and value prop, and TRC and value proposition, like the cost effectiveness, which we do a lot of at the Energy Commission, and that's important, but it has to be felt, as reality by normal people on the ground living their lives, right? And so I just feel like this AEC approach it is bearing fruit. A lot of lessons, both positive and difficult, and that's as it should be. So looking forward to the results from the next cohort, when those are sort of ready to go. And I think the community that you're building, I think you all kind of said it, Chris, just really the growing the sort of value, the understanding of this endeavor, such that every community is different, and so such that kind of platform and toolkit can be used and adapted in new places. And absolutely, we need to be learning from other countries, other states that are having success in this stuff, right? Every place is a little bit different, so it's a little bit of a custom approach, but it takes a lot of knowledge to inform that approach. So love all the work on demand flexibility. I'm trying to row in my oar as hard as I can on that, on a number of fronts. But I think that is so in terms of our affordability proposition or affordability challenge, I do kind of think we're getting to the peak as we're getting close to be able to offload some of the more expensive supply resources. But flex and improving capacity factors, in the system is a wide open door of opportunity to create some downward pressure on rates. And we've got to just take best advantage of that. And so we can get on with the electrification enterprise and decarbonization of our buildings, which, is a big part of our, if we don't do that, we're not meeting our state goals. So all this is it's fundamental. So I guess on demand flexibility, I'll say hallelujah. And I'm here to sort of sprinkle the holy water on that conversation. So, a lot of you are doing amazing things and coming up with really, I think, innovative ideas. Lorenzo, you've been doing a ton of stuff, and there's so many like-minded folks here, and the leaders of the AEC projects. And I hear in your frustration about why can't we just do this in California? And I don't have a great answer for you, because we have the big messy democracy that we have, and the agencies that we have those are big ships, and they take a while to turn. I will say, I don't know if all of you heard the news yesterday about the PUC. We're going to have a little bit of shifting around in the PUC. Alice Reynolds has decided to step down and go over to ARB. And what's that? I'm sorry. To the CAISO board, sorry. But anyway, in any case, she's going to, that opens up a spot. John Reynolds is going to be president, and Christine Harada, who I don't know if any of you know, is going to step in as the newest commissioner. So, I think, that may open some opportunities. Christine's, a good person all about good government and efficient government efficiency. And I think we'll be open to a lot of these conversations. So, anyway, looking forward to sort of sussing out any opportunities that come up in that new reality. So I just want, and again, thank you. Thanks for all the hard work. I know, every now and then I've been getting an update on what's going on and the tough choices and tough things to do on the ground. And these lessons are they're really priceless. And so, the Energy Commission is definitely committed to keeping it going as much as we can, working with the legislature and just really keeping the lessons, helping inform our policy direction recommendation to the legislature based on what you guys are doing. So really appreciate all the hard work. Thanks again.
So we have 4 minutes. A final question? Otherwise, I'll start saying thank you and provide directions to the bar. In the back?
Just yell.
Just yell.
Okay. Is this loud enough?
Sure.
Terrific. So I'm Tim Franken with the Constructive Trades Workforce Initiative. And I just wanted to comment on the notion of the multidisciplinary team. I think that there's an opportunity for labor to be part of the multidisciplinary team. There are a number of people from labor and labor adjacent organizations here today. And I was wondering if all of you who do fit that description would raise your hand. We're few in number, but we are here. And I actually think that it's really important for us to be a part of the discussion. The CEC recognizes that building the workforce to do this work matters, that there is a labor shortage, that labor shortage is mostly a function of the fact that a huge share of the programmatic work of decarbonization is today mostly non-union and relatively low paid, and it's difficult to recruit people to work under those conditions. And when we can actually work to shape programs to give opportunities for contractors who are working within the system of the high road construction labor industry, it opens up opportunities for economic mobility for the people who do the work. And it also gives you the ability to get a higher quality workforce that does higher quality work, which provides energy benefits, reduces climate impacts associated with loss of refrigerants, things like that. All things that I think are important to a lot of people in this room. And we're ready to be constructive partners and would love to be invited to the table.
Okay, thank you. So in the spirit of ending on, okay, Claire, you're in the front row. So, all right. Okay. Claire, final question. Last word, Claire.
Well, no, a quick question. I'm wondering if Chris knows what the customer understanding and uptake is for the on-bill financing in other states.
Other states. I'm not sure. I think there may be some other people that could answer that question better. No. I really don't know. I know that we heard that Kentucky, I think, was one of something like 90% uptick. I will say that anecdotally, we've talked to customers over and over. We've heard from customers that we need something like this that won't follow me if I move away. That's really the key piece, the meter survivability. There are some other functions in the tariff on bill. It essentially generates assets that, as I understand, most of the time the IOUs end up owning. That's an interesting concept. And so it just has a lot to it. I know that there's interest here. We've validated that on the ground. And so if we can just get the support that we need from the legislature or from the regulators, we can do this.
So if Kentucky can do it, California could. Okay.